Okay, we're live.
All right. Good morning and welcome to the November 23rd public hearing and public meeting of the Landmarks Preservation Commission. This meeting is being held via Zoom and live streamed on our YouTube channel. If you would like to testify on any hearing items, please do so by joining the Zoom webinar at the time that the estimated time that is shown on our agenda, which can be found on our website. And if you would just like to watch the proceedings, you may do so at our YouTube channel. We will begin today with two public meeting items, which are items that have already had a public hearing and are back today with a revised proposal in response to the commissioners' comments at the initial public hearing, and then we will have our public hearing agenda after that. So with that, I will turn it over to, oh no, we must do attendance. So Mark, will you take attendance? Thank you.
Yeah. Chair Carroll.
Here.
Commissioner Bland. Commissioner Shamir Barron.
Here.
Commissioner Chapin. Commissioner Chen.
Here.
Commissioner Devonshire.
Here.
Commissioner Goldblum. I know he's here. Commissioner Goldblum.
Here, sorry.
Commissioner Gustafson. John, he's having some internet problems. Is he? I think he may not be. He's technically here, but I don't know. Commissioner Jefferson. Commissioner Lutfi is absent. Commissioner Ann Holford Smith.
Here.
Great, thank you. And now I'll turn it over to Corey Harala to take us through the public meeting and public hearing agendas.
Thank you, Sarah, and good morning, everybody. We'll start today's Preservation Department agenda with public meeting items, as was mentioned. The first is item 1, LPC 22-01205, an application for a binding report in the borough of Brooklyn, block 1117, lot 1, 95 Prospect Park West in Prospect Park, scenic landmark, also Litchfield Villa individual landmark. This is an Italianate style mansion designed by Alexander J. Davis, built circa 1850, within a primarily naturalistic style park designed in 1865 by Frederick Law Olmsted and Calvert Vaux. The application is to construct a ramp, replace a door, and install flagpoles. This was last presented at the public hearing of September 28th, 2021, and no action was taken at that time. And at that public hearing, the commissioners expressed support for making the building more accessible, but some wanted to explore alternatives to the ramp in the currently proposed location and asked the applicants to provide information about various approaches to barrier-free access that were also considered. The applicants were also asked to explore design options for the railings and fall protection at the ramp and stairs, such as pickets, mesh, and dark painted finish. And most commissioners expressed support for the installation of the flagpoles. The applicant team will present and discuss these various options that were explored and the revisions in response to your comments after we open the proceedings.
Okay, thank you, Corey. And Commissioner Goldblum, would you make a motion to open the proceedings?
So moved.
And Commissioner Shamir Barron, would you second that motion?
Second.
All in favor, say aye.
Aye.
Aye. Any opposed? Okay, the applicants may begin.
Okay, Christian, you now have control of the screen. You just need to click on it and you can advance the slides with your arrow keys.
Okay, and you can hear me, correct?
Correct. Please state your name for the record.
My name is Christian Zimmerman from the Prospect Park Alliance. So we're coming back to you with some more analysis that you requested, looking at different alternatives, both for access to the building and also railing options and looks, if you will. So what you see here is a diagram that shows the 5 different scenarios that we were looking at and how do we provide access, ADA access to the building. Number 1 is still our preferred route that we would like. It's the one that we presented most fully last time, but we did look at these other 4 options. And we'll go a bit further into the the third option more fully. But if you look at number 2 quickly, just thinking about it, going through the back entrance of the building, it is the longest route. It is, and that doorway is very narrow. We'd have to do a lot of alterations. And that hallway inside does not, we can't alter it. There's a staircase and we could not change that to create true access in that area. So that one doesn't work very well. 4 is an extremely long route as well that you can see. There would be a lot of structural work that would need to take place. That pathway is currently all landscape. So in doing so, we'd be replacing that entire run with pavement, and the structural wall next to the building would be exposed, and we're not quite sure what that implication would be in dealing with that structural area. The lift, number 5, would be visible from the street, actually, just because of the way the structure is, and it'd be tucked in that front section. We still would need to alter the staircase, which we're going to do regardless, but that lift area, it would just be more visible, and we're looking at not wanting to do that. So the one option that we really wanted to investigate more fully is option 3, and it's using the side portico and entering that way. So as we were looking at that, it is a long run. It would still be, let's see how this is going to work. So it would be coming in, if you look at the image from the left, the pathway will have to be regraded. It is over 8.3% currently. Even if we lower it, we won't be able to get it to 5%. So we would need to put a railing on that left path on both sides for the access. We would need to also put because we'd be lowering the grade, we'd have to put a new staircase where that current path is. What you see in the top middle image, where it's all landscape, that is where the ramp would go. And you see the brownstone wall in the foreground. So we would go between that and then the portico wall. That wall, excavating it to create the ramp, would expose the cellar wall, which is a rough, older, rough stone wall. So we don't know its condition when we would be looking at that. And then because the concrete top is actually for the basement, we'd have to replace that as well. And then you see where the bike racks is, that the bike rack is, you'd be coming through that spot. It does have enough access at that point. We could make that work, but that's how you would enter as it loops around. And then what we did this time also, because we didn't show you what the experience would be inside. And the inside would, as it is now, obviously we'd need to do a lot of alteration, is your first, so door to vestibule 1, that's how you would enter. That door obviously would need to be replaced and create as an ADA door. But you go into this tight space, then you go into the next door, which opens up to a conference room. So it is not equal access. It is not what able-bodied people experience. They experience going to the front space. And in addition to that, we don't have security at this point. So the front door is where our security is, your check-in point. So that would be an issue as well. How would we accommodate that? So this is a diagram showing what the photographs show. You enter at that one point, which currently doesn't meet code, then you go to the next one and then the next one. So we'd have to alter those doors to get to the conference room, and then you go out to the main lobby. This is an elevation showing the experience. So you see the railing that we would need to put in because of the existing grade. And then it loops back. And then you see the new staircase because we need to get to the annex to the right. It's a permit office. So we would be altering that. Also, in addition to that, because on the vestibule, the height elevation, we would actually need to add another guardrail above as well because of the fall height. So for safety standards, so we'd be adding between the columns railings to protect from falls. This shows the lift. So we're getting back to just showing you some of the alternatives as well. That's where the lift would be, and that would be the height. You can see what we've explained, costly to maintain. Need an operator that knows how to deal with them. Going back to our preferred design, it is the shortest distance. It is public, it's equal access for all. Sorry for the background noise. I'm in the park. They're cleaning. So you actually stepping back, this is the experience that you get from Prospect Park West that you would see. As you can see the urns in the distance, but you wouldn't really see the ramping system at all from that distance. And then as you slowly enter from the drive, you see the ramp location in the northwest corner. So it's not until you come upon it that you really see it. And then this is the experience that you get when you enter through the doorway. So this is the main entrance. And you can see there's the front desk for security, and you can see we restored this lobby a number of years ago. So it is the original floor, and it's not equal when you think of if your experience coming through a conference room as opposed to coming this way. Looking back in the upper right, that's the door that everyone enters through. So from an equal access experience, they're very different experiences. This shows you the diagram with the cast stone for that new wall that would be between the original wall and then the building. We looked at one of the things that the commissioners, you all were pretty strong about was changing the color of the railing. Not only that, but possibly investigating looking at more pickets as opposed to having a railing that has pickets and then there's nothing or open. So we went to the black system, painted system, which is this image. So I can go through some of the other studies.
Why don't we first see if we have questions, and then
Okay.
we'll see if we need to go through.
Absolutely. We go
All
back
right.
to that.
Okay, Commissioner Goldblum?
Hi, thank you. I was not around for the first presentation, I don't think. But I would imagine that something that caused pause was the change in the way that the house is seen in the site. So my question is, did you ever consider, would it be possible to add landscaping in front of the ramp location? Obviously not at the access point, but otherwise, and reducing the amount of paving for that driveway that loops around the back, so that the house could seem to be set in the landscape as it was?
We have looked at that. If you look at I have historic photographs. Obviously they didn't have asphalt back then, but the brownstone wall actually was next to the pavement, so there wasn't landscape in front of it. So the wall that, I don't know if my cursor, you can see my cursor moving. So that wall is an original wall. So we were not ever considering that. One of the conversation items was possibly, if not that, is it possible, and we're not sure it is, that could we put it in between the two ramps, the ramp going up, turn around, and the ramp going up, if there was a way to put planting there. So it wouldn't be hiding the original wall, it would be hiding or screening the new wall. We're not so sure we have the space to actually do that where anything would grow, would actually survive in that narrowest piece. I'd have to go back to find, maybe it is that just one before. See, so the idea was, could we somehow change this and put a planting strip at this point? And right now you see there's no room at all. So that would change the geometry of the entrance, the facade wall. But we were looking at that, but we're not quite sure what that kind of impact would be, because we'd be pushing the wall out further into the drive, which isn't so bad, but we'd need at least 3 feet of landscape to make that viable.
Okay, thank you.
Thank you. Other questions? All right, I'm not seeing any other questions. I will note, as you know, commissioners, we have received additional letters from the Victorian Society of New York. They submitted a copy of their original testimony and 2 supplemental letters, and not supportive, as there are no, they didn't feel the changes were substantive enough. Okay. And as you know, those letters have been shared with you all prior to today's public meeting. If there are no other questions, I think we'll move to our discussion. I'm going to start to send a request to unmute all of you. So when you see that, go ahead and accept it. So, you know, this is an application we saw not that long ago. And I think at the time, there were questions about whether it was the least intrusive manner of access. And, you know, we talked about how important it is to provide access to our landmarks. And we talked about how this building is sort of uniquely sited and off this, off the general public route. And the public doesn't actually, unless they go out of their way to come here, they don't actually see this front facade as part of their normal experience. But we asked them to show us some of their other studies. And so they've come back today to present those studies. And as we've seen, some of the changes, some of the studies show that some of the other alternatives do not lead to a primary entrance, and how that's not the spirit of the ADA law. And then some of the other alternatives involve much more intervention, either in terms of fabric or in terms of visibility and size and length. So the applicants have returned to their original scheme, which is to nestle the ramp within the original raised terrace location. And they've revised the railings in response to some of the comments from last time. And so as we think about this, I think, you know, one of the things we've been talking about at some of our recent hearings is the question of what are the standards of appropriateness, and does it have to be the most appropriate or the, you know, your preferred solution? But no, we have sort of a standard of appropriateness. It doesn't have to be what you think might be the most appropriate. It has to be appropriate to the building, given its size, removal of fabric, and relationship to the building in terms of its design. And so I will say that we have in other buildings approved nestling ramps into areaways and planter areas with some subtle changes to the landing to accommodate the ramp at the top. And we've thought about the railings, which have been changed here. And so with that, I think we'll go ahead and start our discussion. I want to start with Commissioner Devonshire, who made a site visit and actually looked at a lot of these alternatives in person. So Commissioner Devonshire, would you start?
Sure. I was not in favor of this particular approach in the beginning. I've actually made several visits, and my visceral response to all of this was that number 3 was actually a preferable approach, until I was walked through what the process would be to enter the building from that doorway. And there are a number of things to it that I became aware of, one of which is once the person, presumably they're in a wheelchair, once they're in the building, they have to go through the conference room, disrupting any activity that's in the conference room in order to get out to security. And again, it would be ridiculous to have another security person at that other entrance. The other possibility, once they got in to the vestibule from that side entrance, the only other option would be to modify that entire area where the chief of staff's office is, and there's simply nowhere else for that office to go. The building is full. And so for me, I'm quite fine with this suggested approach at this point. And aside, I sure would like to see those flagpoles go somewhere else. And I most certainly would like to see parking in front of the building somehow prohibited. I mean, your experience of that building is lessened greatly by the presence of automobiles in front of it.
Okay. All right. I think we did have support for the flagpoles last time, but let's see how it comes out as we go around the discussion, as we go around and have our discussion. Commissioner Chen.
Yeah, I must commend Commissioner Devonshire for making multiple site visits. This is commendable. Talk about doing the due diligence. I have less of a problem initially. I think my comments about the railing as well. So I also have no problem with the flagpole. So unless other commissioners feel otherwise, the readily achievable in this case is the scenario the applicant has presented.
Okay, thank you. Commissioner Gustafson, I don't know if you're with us, or if you've been able, I know you have technical issues today.
I was not here for the original hearing, and I was not here for most of the presentation today. I did study this in advance, and I understood what the issues were the first time, and I am supportive of this approach.
Okay, thank you. Commissioner Shamir Baron.
I was not really in favor of adding this ramp on this side of the building before really exploring other possibilities of using the kind of the raised porch in other places. So, and I think that they've done a really thorough analysis. I still think that I'd hoped that option 4, meaning the option that allowed everyone to use the same door but access it, through this kind of longer way would be possible. But I do think that the 275-foot length run, unless they would have been able to make it somehow double it up along just next to the ADA parking, maybe there would have been a way to kind of modify that approach 4. But sort of in the absence of that, I think I also can support what was originally proposed and what's being proposed today as preferred. I do agree with Commissioner Goldblum that it would be, and we really didn't talk about this last time, important and useful to add landscaping, if I understood what he said, forward of the first wall. That might mean, though, encroaching on the drive path, which would be a good thing, according to Commissioner Devonshire, I think. So But I do think that if there is a way to kind of start to hide a bit of the new material, that would be good. But otherwise, I can support this.
Okay, thank you. Commissioner Holford Smith.
Yeah, so I'd like to commend the applicant for doing this investigation further into other locations, possible locations for this access. But I agree that this seems to be the most direct and least intrusive and gives equal access. I remember at the last hearing, Commissioner Jefferson suggested, which I thought was a good idea, was instead of having the ramp wall slope with the ramp, have it be parallel with the grade. So basically it's a straight line, which would hide some of the railing. It's shown on slide 22. I'd be curious to see if other commissioners think that's a better approach. I think that it might be better to hide some of the railing and have more of the cast stone be visible. There's no rendering of it, so it's a little bit hard to tell. But I think other than that suggestion, I'm on board with this approach.
Okay, thank you. And Commissioner Goldblum.
Okay. Yeah, I think Ann's ideas and Everardo's idea are great. The more you can do to kind of de-emphasize the second plane, I think would be to the better. And I think that can be done with staff. I agree that this seems to be the most logical path and place for the ramp, that the amount of work necessary to put it on the side is extraordinary and would result in a non-equal access arrangement. I think that the looking at what I could quickly in the package, there seems to have been landscaping in front of the wall at various points. It's shown on the site plan. I think that the main thing that will be noticed for those who see it as a difference will be the absence of landscaping. So I would ask that they work with the staff to find as many opportunities for adding landscaping to the arrangement as possible. And in terms of the flagpoles, I don't think I've ever seen a flagpole that low. They just seem incredibly tiny. I personally am not a big fan of the flagpoles. I think they crowd the entrance. They're very close to the building. And I think that with such a voluminous front yard, they would probably be better placed in the landscape and away from the building so that they do not detract from the building.
Okay. All right. So I think we can make a motion today. I think we're at a place where we are comfortable generally with the approach, but have some recommendations for the staff to work on some of the details. So I'll go ahead and make that motion, and then we'll do the vote and see where we are. Okay. In the matter of docket number 22-01205, 95 Prospect Park West, Prospect Park, Litchfield Villa, an individual landmark, an Italianate style mansion designed by Alexander J. Davis, built circa 1850 with a primarily naturalistic style park within a primarily naturalistic style park designed in 1865 by Frederick Law Olmsted and Calvert Fox. This is an application to construct a ramp, replace a door, and install flagpoles. I recommend issuing a positive report finding that the work will help provide direct barrier-free access through the main entrance. Okay, let's see if we can mute everybody in case there's, it might, I don't think it's coming from commissioners, but maybe it's coming from other panelists. Sorry. The work will help provide direct barrier-free access through the main entrance without eliminating or damaging any significant architectural features, that the placement of the ramp within the footprint of the former historic raised terrace will relate well to the massing and compositional organization of the building, that the installation will utilize the existing historic brownstone wall components in their historic locations, as part of the new assembly to the extent possible, that the replacement of the brownstone landing and modifications to the granite steps will be subtle changes which will be compatible with the design of the stair and building, that the proposed cast stone and granite will match the historic brownstone and granite at the building stair and entrance in finish and texture, thereby maintaining a unified composition, that the smooth surfaces and simple detailing of the cast stone walls will remain subordinate to the historic tooled brownstone walls, that flagpoles are in keeping with the common types of markers used throughout the park and will help to identify the current use of this former residence as an administrative office building, and that the flagpoles are simply designed, and that the proposed railings and guardrail will be simply designed and typical in terms of placement, material, size, and finish. However, I recommend that the applicants work with this in consultation with the staff to revise the wall in the ramp to make it parallel to the ground and align or in relationship to the base of the building, and that the applicant explore opportunities to add landscaping in front of the wall, and that the applicant further explore other locations around the front of the building for the flagpoles. Okay, Commissioner Devonshire, would you second that motion?
Second that.
Thank you. Mark, will you call the vote?
Chair Carroll,
Aye.
Commissioner Shamir Baron,
Aye.
Commissioner Chen,
Aye.
Commissioner Devonshire,
Aye.
Commissioner Goldblum,
Aye.
Commissioner Gustafson,
Aye.
Commissioner Holford Smith.
Aye.
With 7 in favor and none opposed, the motion passes.
Okay, thank you. We'll move to the next public meeting item now.
Thank you.
Okay, we'll now go to public meeting item number 2, LPC 22-02315, an application for a certificate of appropriateness in the Borough of Manhattan, Block 489, Lot 25, 182 to 184 Spring Street in the Sullivan Thompson Historic District. This is a commercial building designed by Louis A. Scheinert and built in 1921. And the application is to demolish the existing building and construct a new building. This was last presented at the public hearing of October 19th, 2021, and no action was taken at that time. And please note that at the time, the commissioners were in support of the demolition of the existing building and the construction of a new building at this and the adjacent open lot of the proposed scale and height at 6 stories plus penthouse. However, the commissioners did request that the applicants restudy several aspects of the proposal, including the treatment and character of the base, suggesting that the materials and design should establish a stronger presence. The large scale and wraparound fashion of the corner fenestration, suggesting that a brick pier or other strong feature or mullion be introduced to establish the corner. Overall facade details, finding them to be too subtle in many cases, with some suggesting that additional features be added and others suggesting the terracotta finish be rethought. And the penthouse, for which all agreed that it should be set back from the Thompson Street facade, and some suggesting its overall visibility and presence be reduced while better integrating its design with the rest of the building. And with that, the applicant team will present their revisions in response to these comments after we open the proceedings.
Okay, we're gonna actually go ahead and I'm gonna request to unmute all of you so that we can open the proceedings. Commissioner Holford Smith, would you make a motion to open the proceedings?
So moved.
And Commissioner Shamir Baron, would you second that motion?
Second.
All in favor, say aye.
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 Any opposed? All right, the applicants may begin.
And Commissioner Bland is recused.
Thank you.
Okay, good morning, everyone. I'm Sarah LaPergolo from Seldorf Architects. Thank you all for hearing us out again. I'm going to make sure that I can advance this. Yeah, I can. Okay. So we found the process that we looked at this very interesting, and we really appreciate all of the comments that were given to us at the last hearing. This is our previous axonometric proposal. I think Corey summarized some of the points that the commissioners brought up that we took very much to heart and really allowed us to rethink the basis of this building. I think one could say that our previous proposal was a monolithic brick building with minor terracotta detailing. And I think what we have sort of come to right there is something more that establishes a base of the building, a primary volume, and a top to the building. So this is really exactly what we want to talk to, as well as all of the very specific details that were brought up, which was actually very enjoyable to sort of study and rethink. So we have a number of drawings to show, and then at the very end, just a before and after of the renderings. So I'll walk through this with you here. So I think it was Commissioner Goldblum, Lufty, Holford Smith that had brought up the volume of the penthouse. Previously, we had it in plane with the main building. And so we set that back by 3'8", and that really led us to rethink the materiality of the penthouse. It was light brick, if you recall, and what that did by setting it back, it really kind of reestablished that volume at the top. And also in conjunction to hearing that some of our detailing was of the terracotta was perhaps too subtle. And maybe too little, you'll see when I walk through this, the areas in which we have used sort of the terracotta with much more detailing and strength. And so to that, the penthouse is made with terracotta panels that are matte finish and held within metal frame. And then I'll show you that later in more detail. We've actually, one of the major things we did was to lower the height of the penthouse by 14 inches. That was the parapet we lowered with the glass railing on top. So that really made a difference in the visibility of the penthouse as you go around looking from the street views. Establishing a more pronounced cornice, establishing a horizontal at the base of the building, and really integrating more of the terracotta at the storefront level. There was a lot of discussion around the corner of windows. And with that, we have added not only a 6-inch diameter column that is made out of terracotta that is pinning the corner, but we've also framed the corner as the two pieces of glass come together. We've framed it in wood as well. All the windows are wood, if you remember. And next, let's see. So just quickly, these are just some views again. The previous version and now the setback version. The axon. And again, just a flat elevation, really pointing out all of the details that I had just talked about. One thing I did mention earlier was that above the base cornice height, we've also added a flat piece of terracotta that kind of ties and holds the whole building down, giving it some weight as the mass of the building. I think it was Commissioner Devonshire who talked a lot about whether the finesse or the terracotta and whether it should be glossy or matte. And so what I think is very nice that we did was establish language between flat panel terracotta that is matte, and wherever we have a shaped piece of terracotta, we have made that a gloss finish. And so that combination is quite beautiful together. And next, yeah. And so this, as you see, is the setback, the Thompson Street side and the penthouse setback, and more details around, the same details around the building. And this is just to show you the previous roof plan and then the setback version of 3'8". So our materials, as we discussed before, are stacked brick, the chocolate colored terracotta paired with the matte, which is, if you can see my cursor, the matte flat panel terracotta. There was also, I'll show you in the renderings, but the mechanical penthouse was previously brick, and there was a request that we perhaps disengage that completely from the mass of the building. And so to that end, we've made just a simple louver mechanical penthouse in a dark color, louver color. And so just to, let me see if I can, oops, I don't think I can, sorry, I was trying to zoom in. This is some preliminary detailing of the penthouse, which again, as I expressed, we have metal detailing that will frame the flat terracotta panels capped with a metal channel at the top. And then as we kind of work our way down the building, here we are at the top where we've developed this cornice that we looked around the neighborhood and really tried to piece together what could be a nice, voluptuous, if you will, molding, that cornice piece that really accentuates when the terracotta is glazed, to really, you really catches the light in a beautiful way and a manner of establishing the top of the building. And then again, where this flat piece comes into the cornice is where we've introduced the matte terracotta. Here you see the corner column out of terracotta, and that would be a gloss piece, and then the introduction of the frame of the window in this corner, the wood frame. And here just detailing. We've also taken all of our trim details of terracotta that we had previously, and we created a more depth to them. They were about half the size they are now in terms of that depth. So, it's always tough to show that in drawings, but that was established as well. And now at the base of the building, again, establishing a horizontality that kind of holds the bulk of the building, with the added piece of the matte banding at the top. That flat is matte terracotta, and then what it's capped with, again, is a gloss detail of the terracotta, the glazed. And then essentially the storefront now is no longer has any brick in it, but is all terracotta, a combination of the matte and the glazed terracotta. The base still remains granite, of course. And then here's a good axon, I think, showing kind of how we've updated this corner detail. Really heard you and listened to you, and we thought it could be very beautiful to see this expression of the terracotta in its full form here on the corner, adding also a wood mullion where those two pieces of glass meet, rather than just a butt joint. Now it meets in the same wood. And here is the plan detail of that. So it's, as I said, 6 inches in diameter with a very, very nice deep sill. And so the series of before and afters, we've also sort of developed our rendering. We hired an outside renderer because, as you can imagine, the difficulty of achieving the brick render properly. This was our previous proposal. And so from the same view, this is the new proposal. So with the redone penthouse, if you will, lowered in height in terms of its parapet with a glass railing at the top, and the detailing of the dark terracotta elements. Previously, again, we had the Thompson Street penthouse portion, the dormer portion, come in plain, and then setting that back. And here you can very well see the corner column established from looking west, and then now revised. And again, I think what's interesting here is that 14 inches of lowering the penthouse really changes the visibility. So I think that was a very good call. And what you see over here is that mechanical penthouse in the dark louvered color. but right here is where the actual penthouse is, and you can see is no longer as visible. And then looking south, again from that perspective, and previous, this kind of zoomed in corner. And I wish I could zoom in because I don't know if who else can control the screen to zoom in, but I think this is a good place to pause and to really see kind of the richness of how all of the materials come together. The brick, the stacked brick paired with the gloss glazed terracotta against the matte terracotta, really establishing a hold of the whole volume of the building and letting the street storefronts kind of hover below that. And again, landing on our last view, looking back from the park. Thank you.
Great, thank you very much. Commissioners, do we have any questions? Yes, Commissioner Chen, please go ahead.
Yeah, thank you for that thorough presentation. Out of curiosity, in the new rendering, am I the only one seeing the Thompson Street corner has a very strong vertical line? Or why is that not appearing on the other rendering?
I'm going to go back to it. Here, you mean?
That's correct.
By a strong line, I'm sorry, where do you mean?
The corner. The corner
is
yeah.
the corner is where the new terracotta 6-inch column is, here at the corner.
Thank you.
Okay, other questions? All right, I don't see any other questions. I'll just note for the record that we did receive a letter from Village Preservation and another individual opposing the revised proposal. And those, as you know, have been shared with you in advance. Okay, we're going to begin our discussion, and I'm just making sure everybody is unmuting themselves. Okay. And so the last time we saw this, we asked them, I think that the last time we saw it, most, if not all, commissioners commented on the appropriateness of the demolition of the existing building. And then with respect to the new building, we asked them to set back the penthouse from Thompson Street, which they've done. And in addition, they've also changed the materials or restudied the materials. We asked them to add more details, to restudy the base and storefronts. And many commissioners also asked them to look at the large expanse of glass at the corner windows. And they also were asked to look at the finish of the terracotta. So they have added some detailing, corner column at the corner windows, changed the finish and some of the detailing on the facade. And so we'll go ahead and have that discussion and see where we are. Commissioner Goldblum, would you start this one?
Okay. Well, I thank you for the very succinct and thorough presentation. I think it's fascinating that this firm is. I mean, I think this is very much the word voluptuous was used by the applicant, and I think it's funny that. An architect who is hardly noted for her voluptuousness in terms of design, more for an austere approach, is putting forth something that I think is rather voluptuous. I think it is a very rich, interesting approach done with relatively austere means. I think that the addition of the matte terracotta is very successful. I don't know what Michael Devonshire will think. We'll see. I think it's I think it has a kind of a halfway between brownstone and painted metal feel, which I think is appropriate. I think the general articulation of the base is much more contextual. I think that the enhancement of the depth of the frames has given the building a significant enough resemblance to the context to help it blend in. I don't remember the aprons from last time. I don't know if they were there and I just didn't notice them, or if they weren't there. I think that they are another important key element. I think that the setting back of the penthouse along Thompson Street is effective enough for that side, and the change of material is very important there as well. I do still feel, however, that the Spring Street penthouse central pavilion should be set back further because of its visibility over the Spring Street facade as seen from the playground. But that can totally be done with staff. I think that the enhancement of the cornice again strengthens its relationship with the tenements to either side. And in general, I think that the scheme is much more contextual, and I would vote for it as being appropriate.
Okay, thank you. Commissioner Devonshire.
Yeah, I think I can find this appropriate. I appreciate the change from the heavily glazed terracotta in many cases to a matte. I'm still not a big fan of glazed donut look, but I think I can approve this.
Okay, thank you. Commissioner Chen.
Yeah, I tend to agree with the two Michaels. I think the penthouse in setting back along Thompson is effective. I think the base is nicely articulated. I'm not going to play designer here, but in the hand of a good team, I think they can work with staff with some refining. I like the Michael Boblum said about setting back the depth of the windows. That's an excellent detail, but I can find it appropriate.
Okay. And Commissioner Gustafson, I don't know, again, if you were able to tune in for this.
Nope, I've been here.
Okay, great.
Quiet as a mouse. I guess my two biggest concerns the first time around were the rooftop being flush with the wall of the building, the Thompson Street side, and I think they've taken care of that completely. And the second concern was about the corner windows, and I appreciate the effort. I am not quite comfortable with the result, which is when you see this from a distance. I think it's almost a distinction. I know what they've done. I've seen the column addition there, and but I think for me it's a distinction without a difference. When you, I think what they're when you do see those views, other than the one that Commissioner Chen pointed out, it still has that appearance of two very large sheets of glass meeting at the corner, and I would ask that they work with the staff to try to beef up the appearance of that corner, so it turns out that it can be seen from some materiality can be seen on that corner from all directions.
Okay, thank you. Commissioner Shamir Baran.
Thanks. I think I had questions about the window, the sort of the logic of the windows sizing, but not enough to make it, in my mind, not appropriate. I also think that I understood and did not find problematic the very thin framing or outlining of the openings with a very thin terracotta in a kind of a Losian way. But I think it'll be interesting and a good experience to meet the matte terracotta with the glazed on the ground floor, and it'll be interesting. It'll feel right there. In general, I think that this is a little bit odd, and I think that Commissioner Gustafson's point now about the corner being a kind of a glazed open corner, that is a windowed open corner will still read that way, but I don't find that problematic. I mean, I think in general, there's a kind of a strange, there's a little still an awkwardness about the building, and I can't exactly put my finger on it, but I think it's acceptable and appropriate, and I can approve it.
Okay, thank you. Commissioner Holford Smith?
Yes, thank you. I think the applicant did a really good job of incorporating some of our comments, and I think it's yielded a more contextual building that I think it works better with its neighbors, and I think it's also a more rich design as a result as well, especially the matte terracotta at the ground floor, sort of cornice level. And I setting back the penthouse on Thompson Street was a key move. I agree with Commissioner Goldblum that the Spring Street facade of the penthouse should be pushed back or down to make it less visible. And I also agree with Commissioner Gustafson about the corner. I think that could be a little bit more robust, and those large windows could take that and you'd still not lose the effect of having this large expanse of glass. But I think overall the subtle changes to the detailing are an improvement, and I find it appropriate.
Okay, all right, great. So thank you all, commissioners. I think we have a consensus and with some modifications for an approval today. And I think that we could support this building in this context, including the demolition of the existing building, the new building in terms of its height and massing and design and materials and details, but with the recommendation that they continue to work with the staff on two components. One is to set the Spring Street penthouse back further from the Spring Street facade, and two, to continue to work with the staff to strengthen the corner column on the corner windows. Commissioner Goldblum, would you be comfortable doing the motion on this and adding those two recommendations?
Sure. Regarding 182 to 184 Spring Street in the Sullivan-Thompson Historic District, the application is to demolish the existing building and construct a new building. I note that at the time of designation, the building was clad in netting and scaffolding, and therefore no determination was made regarding whether or not it contributes to the Sullivan-Thompson Historic District. The designation report states that the Historic District is significant for its important cultural history and variegated streetscapes that reflect the waves of immigration and migration that transformed this neighborhood and New York City in the years before the Great Depression. That the predominant typologies of existing buildings within this district include 3- and 4-story row houses and larger purpose-built old law and new law tenements, many with commercial ground floors, and that the adjacent lot is vacant. I therefore recommend approval with modifications. Finding that the existing building has been determined to be structurally unsound by a professional engineer and the demolition is warranted by its deteriorated condition, that the existing 2-story commercial building is not of a type that is described as contributing to the historic district, and that the primary architectural features of the facades, including a prominent pent roof cornice, were removed from the building prior to designation. Therefore, its demolition will not result in the removal of a significant building or detract from the special architectural or historic character of the historic district. That the construction of a new building at this corner site within the district will enhance the continuity of the street wall, which is currently of a lower scale than it was historically, and partially broken by the existing vacant lot. That the height and massing of the proposed building will be comparable to other buildings within this historic district, which features numerous buildings of 6 stories or greater, particularly along Thompson Street, and some with comparable street frontages. That the floor to ceiling heights will approximate the scale of neighboring properties, helping to integrate the building within the streetscape. That the width and spacing of vertical bands of windows, some of which vary in size at each of the street facades, will recall the proportions and widths of the collective fenestration patterns of narrower neighboring buildings. That the proposed materials palette, including a red brick facade with brown glazed terracotta trim, dark granite base cladding, and wood storefronts and windows, will be in keeping with the materials, textures, and tones found throughout the streetscape and historic district. That the level of transparency and the composition of the ground floor storefront components, including large display windows with mullions and bulkheads, a recessed corner entrance, and terracotta piers, profiled cornice and surrounds, will be compatible with the commercial character of the bases of buildings found throughout the historic district. That the presence of a visible penthouse, which is set back from the Spring and Thompson Street facades, will be consistent with the presence of visible rooftop penthouses, bulkheads, and setbacks found on some buildings in this historic district, and will not detract from the architectural features of adjacent buildings or the streetscape. That the rooftop bulkhead will be simply designed and, when seen at a distance, will be typical of rooftop accretions found throughout the streetscape and historic district in terms of size, materiality, and level of visibility. That the lot line facade featuring brick cladding and punched openings and a projecting bay window located toward the rear with minimal visibility from the street is simple and harmonious in materials and design. That the design and massing of the rear of the building, featuring brick cladding with punched window openings and a tiered volume that steps down toward the back of the lot, will not overwhelm a cohesive central green space. And I, however, find that the applicant will continue to work with the staff on modifying two aspects of their design. First, they will work with the staff to set back the Spring Street penthouse central portion so that it reduces visibility of that portion. And they will enhance the visibility of the corner window terracotta and wood detailing treatment at the prominent corner windows above the second floor.
Thank you. And Commissioner Devonshire, would you second that motion? All right. Let's go. Commissioner Holford Smith, would you second that motion?
I second it.
Thank you. Mark, will you call the vote?
Chair Carroll,
Aye.
Commissioner Shamir Barron,
Aye.
Commissioner Chen,
Aye.
Commissioner Devonshire,
Aye.
Commissioner Goldblum,
Aye.
Commissioner Gustafson,
Aye.
Commissioner Holford Smith.
Aye.
With 7 in favor and none opposed, the motion passes.
That's approved with those two adjustments. Please continue to work with the staff. And we'll now move, thank you. We'll now move to our public hearing agenda.
Thanks. And we will begin with public hearing item number 1, LPC 21-09932, application for a certificate of appropriateness in the Borough of Queens, block 8043, lot 49, 115 Park Lane in the Douglaston Historic District. This is a colonial revival bungalow style freestanding house designed by Norman McGlashnan and built in 1914. The application is to legalize construction of additions and related alterations completed in non-compliance with Certificate of Appropriateness 06-9207.
Okay, commissioners, the applicants have entered the hearing. So you now have control of the screen. Just click on the screen and then you can advance the slides with your arrow keys. Please state your name for the record and you may begin.
Good morning. My name is Philip Metropolis. I'm the architect for 115 Park Lane. And actually, it's a very unique opportunity I have today. I'm to be able to present this to not the first, but the second public hearing for this particular property. This homeowner, the property was purchased in 1992 by a young couple. Prior to the area being designated, the Douglaston Historic District was designated in 1996. But in 1995, the couple had their first child, and for the next 9 years proceeded to have more children. And they approached me when they had 5 children and were pregnant with their 6th to expand this property so that they had more space for their large family. 3 of their children, as it turned out, were sadly born with a visual disability. So the homeowners were specifically interested in looking to provide a large house where the children could recreate at home quite easily and quite safely. That's why we approached such a large project. And it took us a public hearing plus 2 public meetings to get through it. And we got through. So the property was approved in 2006. The homeowner is actually a general contractor, and he was running the show. I was certainly involved as the architect and doing a certain technical. I was had a responsibility for technical reports, but as with large contractors and small residential architects, perhaps they don't always see eye to eye, and certain things were changed during construction of which I had little or no control over. And here we are today now, finally, with his last two children approaching the end of their high school years and potentially looking at maybe moving on and downsizing the property, and potentially that's why we're here, to try to legalize it so that we may close this application out. So the things that there were on your first page here, you'll see there's a list of 7 or 9 items that were not executed in compliance with the approved set of LPC drawings from 2006. There's a front entrance door, which is in shadow in this image. You'll see in later images, it has an arch top and it has some arch detailing on it. There's missing half of a wood balustrade on the existing front porch. There was a more contemporary design for the front masonry walk, which was replacing a brick walk. It's now a bluestone and riverstone walk up to the front porch. There is a generator down near the garage in the front yard, concealed by planting, but you'll see that. And at the rear of the building, with some seasonal views, there's an arched window, and then we have an expansion of the driveway as well. And again, driveway was expanded because they were looking for outdoor space to recreate their children. This particular site has in its 120 feet, it slopes 16 feet in grade elevation. Originally, it was 2 zoning lots, the main bungalow and a separate 2-car garage, which was really quite modest, and a permission was granted to demolish the garage and expand the house as you see here. So here's the side-by-side of the approved elevation and the as-built elevation, where you can see the missing railings, the change into front door delineation, relocation of the lower level door to the garage, and then the addition of the generator on that left side of the building. So those are the things at this particular page. And then we have some photographs. You can see the close-up of the existing front of the front as-built front door. Then the stone walks with the wrought iron rails, which have some detail. They're not a typically straight picket. And then you have the garage entrance, which is shifted in order to make room for the generator, which is shown there on the right side of your screen. It is really rather quite concealed with evergreen shrubs. Then in the rear, you can see, I actually thought that the work that the homeowner contractor did on the rear of the building cleaned it up quite a bit. The rear previously was a little haphazard, but it turned out he cleaned up quite nicely with the unification of a couple of the dormers, but then he did pop up a center dormer and put a large arch window. There was a small arch window. I don't have that drawing from the as-built, but there was a small arch window at one point. And then other things that were changed here, let's just look at the photographs. Here's that large arch window that was added. And then on the left side of the screen, you can see the arched window from the seasonal view from the next street behind. And then at the rear yard on the right, you'll see the vinyl fence which surrounds the pool. Here are the end elevations with the as-built on the right, and some modifications he made as far as location of the cellar areaway stair, changing to the projected bay window over the garage, and a change to the garage door design from a carriage style door to this arch top paneled door. And then I guess the mechanics isn't really shown there, the generator. Here's the front porch on the left where the railing obviously was not installed. A little glimpse of the vinyl fence on the right side of the house. And then on the right side of the photograph, you see the expansive driveway. Initially, there was a large tree that came down right at the corner of the driveway. That's why the driveway had sort of a curvilinear layout because we were going around a big tree, which was an old silver maple, which has subsequently fallen or like was removed. It was a street tree. And then here's a site plan where you could see the expansion of that driveway. Would have just been lawn area, and he modified a little bit of the access to the rear yard, but that was an improvement. And at one point, there was a retaining wall in the front yard, which was removed, and the entire front yard was landscaped with rocks and a waterfall feature, as well as rebuilding those masonry stairs. We've added some. Here are the original, the designation report photographs that show that the house was somewhat intact, but had several modifications that rendered it really not quite the original masterpiece it could have been at one time. This addition on the house on the left side over the garage, we couldn't establish if that was original or not, but it sure, in our opinion, was an ugly duckling in that respect. And the goal was to really expand this house to be a house more appropriate to a very large site in the Douglaston Historic District. And here's the 1980 or 70 tax photo as well, where you could see the retaining wall that separated the yards instead of the landscaped front yard as it is now. I think that's just about it. It's these numerous items. I'll go to the first page where we can then, review those items if there's any questions.
Okay, thank you very much. All right, so commissioners, there are a lot of little things here that are in non-compliance. So if there are any questions, please go ahead so we can make sure everybody understands all of the components. Any questions? Okay, not a lot of questions. Okay, so we'll go ahead and take testimony now, and we may have some questions after that. So I will turn it over to Sasha Seeley to take us through the testimony.
Thank you. Okay, so first for signups, I have Historic District Council. Okay, I have just welcomed you in as a panelist. You can go ahead and unmute your mic and state your name for the record. You have 3 minutes to speak.
Good morning, thank you. My name is Diego Roballo from the Historic Districts Council. HDC feels that it is pertinent to object to this proposal to legalize inappropriate and non-compliant alterations when it is clearly shown that there are previously approved drawings that are not being followed. There are serious issues with each section in the proposed work. Firstly, the arch door is inappropriate, out of scale, and does not match the architectural style of the house. The arch window uses incorrect proportions and detailing and is a particularly egregious assault on this otherwise handsome house. There is a more appropriate solution seen in the approved drawings that is being ignored. Next, the lack of railing on the left side of the porch causes asymmetry and knocks off the balance of the house and is once again violating the previous approved drawings. In that same vein, the stoop and path railings are also inappropriate and distractingly unattractive. At the base, the proposed masonry cladding veneer looks unconvincing and is inappropriate and also does not follow the approved drawings. As for the site, the Douglaston Historic District is characterized by particular proportions of planting to house as well as the relationships between the houses and the street. The proposal diminishes that relationship by the addition of such a large amount of concrete in the landscaping. It takes a house that was meant to sit in an Olmsted-esque landscape and turns it into something resembling a McMansion. Additionally, the vinyl fence is a completely inappropriate material for this project, and there should not be a large bulky mechanical unit placed in the front area of the house where it is so prominently visible. We are particularly concerned about the loss of integrity this house has endured and are confused as to why the previously approved drawings are so blatantly ignored. Thank you.
Thank you. Okay, next I will be calling on Victorian Society, New York, John Graham. Okay, you should have received a request from me to rejoin the meeting as a panelist. You can go ahead and unmute your mic. You have 3 minutes to speak. Please state your name for the record. You should be in the meeting, John. I see you.
Morning,
Okay.
Commissioners. John Graham for the Victorian Society in New York. Founded in New York City in 1966, the Victorian Society in America is dedicated to fostering the appreciation and preservation of our 19th and early 20th century heritage. The New York chapter promotes preservation of our historic districts, individual landmarks, interiors, and civic art. The owners of 115 Park Lane, who apparently spent more time shopping the aisles of Home Depot than they did reading the Douglaston designation report, the rules of the commission, or their permit, have presented a long laundry list of alterations they would like to legalize. A list too long to allow in-depth testimony on each of these items. So we break it into changes which we believe should be denied and the few which we believe could be approved. Changes A through F should all be denied. The introduction of an arched transom at the main entrance, which has necessitated the removal of a section of trim at the ceiling of the porch, is too large for the space. The absence of railings at the right side of the front porch, which diminishes the overall symmetry of the main facade. The installation of stoop and path railings with a contemporary design which contrasts with and diminishes the design of the historic porch railings. The installation of stone veneer cladding at the base using small slabs of stone in an irregular bond pattern, which is atypical of stone foundations found on buildings of this age and type, and leaves the foundation of a large section on the left wing as painted concrete or stucco. The installation of a mechanical unit at the front, which has diminished the overall character and the formality of the front facade, and the installation of a large arched window and raised roof at the rear facade visible across adjacent properties, a change which required the removal of a pair of multi-light French doors, defined as special windows under the rules, and a balcony, and altering the main roof line, and uses a window which is out of scale with and of a different type than all the historic windows at this building. All of these illegal alterations can and should be reversed. The VSNY finds that items G, the expansion of the driveway paving, and H, the installation of vinyl fencing at the east property line and at the rear, have not destroyed or obscured any historic material and could be approved. Finally, the VSNY questions alterations to the garage entrance shown on the east-west elevations, including the removal of a pair of historic garage doors, which had wooden reinforcement in a typical X pattern, and small multi-light windows, alterations to change the opening from a square head to an arched head, and the installation of a single garage door in the modified opening. We do not understand why this isn't included in the list of changes the owner is proposing to legalize, but find that significant historic material has been removed. We were surprised when we did a violation search that apparently no LPC violations have been issued for this garage door alteration or for any of the other unauthorized work. Thank you very much, Commissioners. Sorry to be so breathless.
Thank you. All right, those were our signups. Let me just take a look over at the attendees and see if there are any additional hands raised. I do not see anyone who wishes to speak, so that is it. Thank you.
Thank you, Sasha. And I'll also note for the record that we received a resolution from Queens Community Board 11 recommending approval of the changes. Okay, I'll turn back to the applicant now. Would you like to respond to the comments we've heard? And I'll just note also that we have identified all of the work that is in non-compliance and are working with the applicant, and that is typical of our process before a violation is actually issued. There's a warning and we work with the applicant. So they're being addressed. To the extent that they are not addressed after this process, those would certainly be upgraded to notices of violation. And then also some of the items are being resolved at staff level pursuant to our rules. Nothing's approved yet, but there are some changes that are happening at staff level. But we're in response to the comments that were on the items before the commissioners today. Mr. Metropolis, would you like to go ahead and respond?
No, I think I'm okay. I don't really have any responses. it is what it is. It speaks for itself. All I could say is that the community board members who are of the historic district committee all pass by. Everybody knows the neighborhood. We're all neighborhood people. It seems to be that, yes, these things are different, but they find it appropriate enough that it survived. It's been there for 15 years and it seems to be pleasurable, and it certainly was a improvement to what was there before. Thank you.
Okay, thank you. All right, commissioners, any final questions? Okay, and then we'll begin our discussion, and I have sent you all requests to unmute, so please go ahead and do that. And Commissioner Goldblum, would you make a motion to close the hearing?
So moved.
Commissioner Bland, would you second that motion?
Second.
All in favor, say aye.
Aye.
Aye. Any opposed? Okay, the hearing is closed and we're going to begin our discussion, and it's helpful to keep this slide up because it shows the components that we're looking at: the new arched entrance opening, the lack of railings on the side of the porch, the contemporary design of the stoop and the railings on the stone stoop, the stone veneer cladding at the base of the historic house, the HVAC unit at the front facade behind the bushes, and the large arched window and raised roof at the rear facade, which is visible seasonally, and the expansion of the driveway, the paving at the driveway, which largely happens at the back of the driveway to the back of the lot, but it also includes a new path system to the side, the door in the new wing, and the vinyl fence at the rear of the property. So when we go ahead and have our discussion, we should try to comment on each of those aspects of the proposal. And, you know, this, as we've seen the designation photo, the house looked quite different. It was the main portion. The commission approved the wings on either side. The porch was also enclosed, and as part of that commission approval for the two side additions, the commission approved opening up the porch. And so that missing railing is not a historic railing, but was certainly part of the approval. Can we actually leave that rendering, because I think it's helpful for the commissioners to have the list as they go through the comments. There we go. Great. Okay, so let's begin our discussion. Commissioner Gustafson, would you like to start this one?
We see legalizations frequently here. This is, I will say, one of the most bizarre requests for legalization that I have seen in my 7 years. People make mistakes all the time. What is clear here is there are no mistakes. This applicant got an approval, submitted provable plans, and then in large part ignored it. And I think the word one of the people who testified used was it was blatantly ignored. Our standard is, as always, what would we have approved? And in this case, it becomes, we have a great deal of evidence about what we would have approved in the first place. And let me start preliminarily with this. It is somewhat insulting to hear that connecting the size of this family or their disabilities with what work was done here. Because as I looked at the plan that was approved, it was a major expansion that was approved. And many of these items have absolutely nothing to do with that issue. And so let's separate that out. As far as I'm concerned, this isn't even close to being acceptable. There isn't a single proposal made by this applicant to adjust anything to the plans that were approved, or to adjust to any of these matters to bring this site into further compliance, or give us an opportunity to find something that is closer to being approvable. I mean, as trivial as it may seem, the lack of railings on one side of the porch one would have imagined this proposal would have come with, we're putting in the railing on that side, the other side of the porch. But we don't even get that. This is basically, I did what I wanted, approve it. And the lack of railing, no. The contemporary design of the stoop and path railings, no. Stone veneer, no. The mechanical unit at the front facade, even hidden, we wouldn't have approved it if it was proposed in the front of the building. I wouldn't have. The large arched window that's completely out of character with the back of the house, I would not have approved. The expansion of the paving at the driveway, I think I would have said that's fine. That's largely not visible, and that I would have accepted. And the vinyl fence, no, that wouldn't have been approved. I wouldn't have approved that either. So, and there are a number of other items I'm sort of mystified why they're not in front of us. That garage door, I can't imagine we would have approved that thing that was put there. Can't imagine I would have approved it. I assume there's something else going on there that explains why it's not in front of us. But I agree largely with the testimony that we heard for the basis, the reasons for these things these elements not being approvable as is. And so not even close.
Okay, thank you. Commissioner Shamir Baran.
I think that, the violations are all of a piece, as Commissioner Gustafson has said, but I think that I could accept many of them, despite the fact that I'm not happy about them, with the exception of the arched window doorway at the entrance on the front. I'm not thrilled with it on the back either, but I don't know about whether or not there is this kind of true public visibility on the back side. And it's certainly visible to some neighbors, but I don't know that it is as, sort of dramatic a presence in the public view. So for me, it is really the issue of the front door, and that's what I think needs to be redone. Otherwise, I can accept the rest.
Okay, thank you. Commissioner Holford Smith.
Yes, thank you. I think I'm in the Commissioner Gustafson camp here, looking at the changes to the approved drawings and wondering if we would have approved them if they had been brought to us originally. And I think for the most part, the answer is no. I think that the front steps could be allowed to remain with a change in railing, but new railings on the porch, change to the front door to eliminate that arch top and restore the wood molding that goes across. The random sort of bluestone siding is not appropriate. So I think the paving is fine, although I think it's excessive. The vinyl fence is something that we probably would not have approved. So I'm really not in favor of approving very much in this application.
Okay, thank you. Commissioner Goldblum.
Thank you. I usually leave to John the ire and regarding violators and legalizations, but this time I'm like, go. This is so egregious. The guy got a tripling of the size of his house. He's a contractor. God save us, he can't read his own plans. It's just. It's flagrant. It's gratuitous. It's really just deeply upsetting. And I'm trying hard not to let that color my views and to be as dispassionate as we are charged to be. But it's hard. It really is hard in this one. I agree with John on pretty much everything. The arched entrance should be modified. It's also in a stained wood, it looks like, which is completely not in keeping with this kind of house. The railings have to be replaced. The stoop and path railings have to be changed. And one thing I do want to note, if you look at the front elevation, one thing that is a significant change that is not noted here is the change of grade as it abuts the left side of the center pavilion of the house, what was the original house. The house used to kind of sit on a levelish plateau, and then the ground fell off as you go to the left. what they did is they scraped the soil away from the left side of the stair, according to the drawing anyway, thus exposing that very high stone wall, or now stone wall, exacerbating the asymmetry of the facade, modifying the way it's seen from the street. I think that the staff might look at that. And it was granted, it was for a very important thing, a water feature, which is certainly a historic element, no doubt. I think that should be looked at and considered. I think the way the house is presented to the street is one of the most important aspects of, preservation, and eroding away the hillside there, I think bears note. I think that the stone veneer, I think there can be stone veneer on the cladding of the base of the historic house, but it has to be historically correct, the stone veneer, not sticky stone, right out of the catalog. The mechanical unit in front of the house, I worry if that even meets code. It's got to be 10 feet from an operable window, and it doesn't look like it's 10 feet from an operable window to me. But I would accept it if it were. I remember we did one of those once, I believe in Queens, that it was in a front yard a while ago, but the staff has to accept that it is fully screened all year. The arched window at the rear completely would never have been approved by us. The driveway, probably okay. Vinyl fence, I don't recall us approving a vinyl fence anytime in the recent past. So yeah, back to the drawing board.
Okay. And, on the grading, I think if you raise a very good point, it really changes how one perceives this building. I had to study the designation photo and the current photos many times to sort of understand that change. I do think that our approval, though, did allow for that change in topography and regrading, and we approved
Look at his drawing.
A stucco base.
Go back to his drawing. If you go back to his elevation, I thought that he was proposing to leave that. Yeah, if I'm looking at his approved versus as built.
We'll have the staff look at it very carefully, but I was going to say, we approved a blank stucco wall, painted the same blue as on the building. And, in thinking about how to address these violations, even if we did approve this regrading, that might be an area that could be changed to mitigate some of the work that's actually in violation. But we'll first also identify if there's any non-compliance issue with it. Okay, Commissioner Devonshire.
Wait, a contractor who doesn't follow the drawings? I'm shocked, Michael. It's just phenomenal. I have gotten past what I consider to be the insult, the amazing insult to the staff who work their butts off on things like this, and to my fellow commissioners. I've gotten past that, though, and so I can address all of the things that I would not have approved had this been a hearing for a new application. No, actually, more easily, I'll mention the things that I can approve. I can approve the expansion of the paving at the driveway, and I can approve the raised roof and the window at the rear facade of the house. All of the rest I reject.
Okay, great. Thank you. Commissioner Chen?
Yeah, I think that most of the commissioners have already spoken, the concerns, and I think it's in one word, back to the drawing board.
Okay, Commissioner Bland.
Yeah, nothing like an impending sale for a comeuppance. I think this is a high watermark for me in 13 years of looking at all sorts of applications, including violations. It's sort of staggering. I'm just going to go down the list, A through H, and just say yes or no. A, no. B, no. C, no. D, I'll say yes. E, no. F, I'll say yes, partly because of what Addie said. I think it's probably not really visible except to neighbors. G,
Hey, Fred, could you please give a little more reasons than just a simple yes and no? That'd be very helpful, I think.
all right, well, I think it's mostly been said already. Arched entrance opening. It's wood, unpainted wood, which is inappropriate. And the arch was never there before, so that's inappropriate. Lack of railings on one side of the porch. They should be there. They're on one side, they should be on the other side of the symmetrical centerpiece. C, the contemporary design of the stoop and the path railings. It's the path railings, I think, that I'm most against. The stone veneer, I said okay on that. The mechanical unit, it's been suggested that it's maybe even doesn't meet code. Whether it meets code or not, I think we would have approved it in the front yard like this without some other explanation, which maybe there is some, but I haven't heard it. The window, I would not have approved that. We would have changed it, but I can accept it in the spirit of some sort of a compromise here to get some of the work at least corrected before it's sold.
And as you noted, it's sort of somewhat less visible. Limited
That's right. And it's less visible, yes. Expansion of the paving at the driveway, I can accept that. The vinyl fence, I cannot accept.
Okay, great. Thank you, commissioners, for going through each of these many components. And the list was very helpful. So I do want to thank the applicant for providing the list for us to work from in our discussion. So it's clear that most aspects of this proposal to legalize work in non-compliance are not approvable as is today. The commissioners have listed reasons and the items that they are not supportive of. There are a few discrete items that may have some support. So we will take no action, and we will ask the applicant to work with the staff to address all of the items that have been discussed and commented on today. Okay, thank you. We'll move to the next item.
Next item is public hearing item number 2, LPC 22-03172. An application for a certificate of appropriateness in the Borough of Manhattan, Block 51, Lot 13, 123 Greenwich Street, the New York Curb Exchange, incorporating the New York Curb Market Building, individual landmark. A neo-Renaissance style monetary exchange building designed by Starrett and Van Vleck and built 1920 to 21 and 1930 to 31. The application is to construct a rooftop addition, replace windows, and install storefront infill, louvers, and canopies. And my understanding is the canopies have been removed from the proposal. So it's the other items listed before that you'll review today.
Hey, commissioners, the applicants have entered the hearing. They now have control of the screen. Just click on your screen and then you can advance the slides using your arrow keys. Please state your name for the record and you may begin. Cass, I think you're muted. Cass, you're still muted and your camera is not on, just so you know. Okay, I'm gonna try to take control away from you and give it back to you.
Okay, I think, can you hear me now?
Yes, we can.
Okay.
So now I've given you control again. So if you want to click on your screen again, you should be able to advance the slides that way.
Okay. Great. Let's try and begin. Okay. My apologies. Commissioners, good morning. Cass Stackelberg, Higgins, Grace, Barth and Partners, and thank you, Abby, for that introduction. I'm joined this morning by Paul Taylor of Stonehill Taylor Architects for the project, as well as our clients, Jared Stoll and Tom LaRue. I'm going to run through the presentation, and Jared, Paul, and Tom are available for discussion and questions as the as the discussion continues. The property address is 123 Greenwich Street, 87 Trinity Place. It's the New York Curb Exchange, historically known as the New York Curb Market. The property is an individual landmark designated in 2012. It's a through block site that runs from Trinity Place to Greenwich Street. It was constructed in 2 phases, and the portion on the left is the original portion completed in 1921, fronting onto Greenwich Street, and you can see the 5 monumental windows bring daylight into the historic trading hall of the exchange. And then the portion on Trinity Place was completed 10 years later in 1931. Both portions were designed by Sterrett Van Vleck, and the portion on Trinity Place was constructed with office use on the upper floors. Historically, members of the exchange entered through the Greenwich Street side of the building when that was the sole portion of the building, and then when the tower portion was built in the 1930s, the main entry was brought to the Trinity Place side, and that became the primary elevation of the building. The building's been vacant since 2009, and as part of the project that is being undertaken here, it is a building-wide rehabilitation, including an extensive scope of restoration work on the envelope, significant restoration and preservation on the interiors, and introduction of new rooftop features, which we'll share with you in just a moment. I'll also mention that in addition to landmarks review, the applicant, our client, is going through the historic tax credit program. So in addition to all the work on the exterior and the restorative approaches that are being taken on the exterior, there's significant restoration work on the interior, particularly at the significant spaces, including the main trading hall, and some of the significant interior office spaces on the upper portion of the tower. There are photographs of some of those spaces in the appendix if you're interested to see those interior spaces. Continuing. Sorry. A site plan just to illustrate the location of the property in Lower Manhattan. As I mentioned, it's a through block site. It's got 175 feet of frontage on Greenwich Street and 125 feet on Trinity Place, facing onto the Trinity Church Cemetery. A sense of the overall scope of the project. So these are existing and proposed axonometric diagrams just to illustrate for you sort of the overall approach. On the left is the existing, proposed on the right. And currently, you can see there's the lower original portion, the base here that fronts onto Greenwich Street, and the tower portion, as we refer to it, fronting onto Trinity Place. There is a city's worth of mechanical equipment up on the roof currently of the building, much of it installed right at the parapet line. This is all very highly visible equipment. One of the benefits of approaching this project and the rehabilitation holistically is to rationalize the mechanical systems, getting all of this equipment off the roof, installing some on the high roof, which is not visible from the east and visible only from the back of the building on Greenwich, removing these elements at the parapet, and constructing a one-story set of pavilions that are set back and minimally visible only from Greenwich Street. There are other changes at the base of the building, the installation of louvers throughout in certain locations just to condense and consolidate the mechanical equipment. Flipping around to the other side, so the Trinity Place elevation. On Trinity, everything is restorative above the ground floor. We're just making modifications at the base, which you'll see in a moment. Installation of a cooling tower on the upper roof, hidden behind this very tall parapet, and then the addition on the low roof, again, removing all of this highly visible mechanical equipment and sort of rationalizing it as part of the overall project. Historically, a map from the 1920s on the left and the 30s from the right, the Curb Exchange, or New York Curb Market, as it was known historically, with its fronting onto Greenwich Street and a forecourt open onto the Trinity Place side, and then the addition of the tower portion in 1931. The property and the exchange, historically known as the Curb Market, then became known as the New York Curb Exchange, and then in 1953, changing its name to the American Stock Exchange. Some historic images on the left, that forecourt. This is looking east from Trinity Place underneath the elevator, the 6th Avenue elevator. The building historically had elevated trains running on either side of it, both on the 6th Avenue L running on Trinity Place and the 9th Avenue L running up Greenwich Street. This is a photo pre-demolition of the L on the east side with the forecourt here, and then a view on the west side after the elevated had been demolished of the side of the building. Again, these monumental windows bringing daylight into the trading hall. Historically, there were windows of that similar scale on the east side, also daylighting the trading hall. Those are obscured when the tower was constructed. A couple views of the tower from the 30s and the 40s. Again, the elevated you can see running here between the building and the cemetery, and then demolished in the late 1930s, and an overall view of the building on the east side. We've been able to find very high quality historic photographs which have guided the design of the new infill on the ground floor. So as I mentioned, when the tower was constructed, this main entry at the center of the elevation became the main members entry and brought you by stair up to the trading hall, and then secondary entries on either side, north and south, we think finished in some kind of white metal multi-light design with nice articulation on doors and transoms. Some existing condition photographs first on Greenwich Street. The monumental windows, steel monumental windows remain. Those, of course, will be restored. There are a number of non-historic windows on the north side of the elevation with louvers and air conditioners. All of those will be removed and new windows will be installed. Some details of the varying conditions of the limestone and the windows, cracked masonry, all of that will be addressed as part of the restoration program that's will be undertaken working with the staff. At the base of the building, and apologies for the Google Street Views, but there are sidewalk bridges and things across the front that preclude us from clear photographs. But you can see across the base of the Greenwich Street side, there's a combination of mostly non-historic infill, doors, wood, metal panels rather, set into these large openings. We believe this bay, which is here, a loading bay, may have some historic material. We're using that as a guide for the new infill. The condition of the current infill is quite poor, and this would be replaced in kind. And then the infill down at the southernmost bay. Flipping around now up onto the roof. So again, you can see the 7th floor roof with all the mechanical equipment, just illustrations of backup generators, cooling towers, this very tall enclosure, 25 feet tall, that has a whole series of different mechanical units and things inside. All of that will be removed. On the Trinity Place elevation, most of the historic steel windows remain. All those will be retained and restored. Some louvers will be removed and new windows installed. Masonry will be cleaned, of course. And across the upper floors, some details of some of those windows and some of the biological growth that'll be removed. At the base, similarly, a necessary Google Street View, but you get a sense of the overall arrangement of the ground floor on Trinity Place and the non-historic circa 1960s, 70s infill, all of which will be removed and new infill will be installed based on those historic photographs you saw a moment ago. The back of the tower elevation primarily is infilled with non-historic windows. There are some remaining historic windows on the upper floors. You can see them here. There's a line of an open fire stair along this vertical series. You'll see in a bit we're proposing to infill that with louvers to provide mechanical equipment within the footprint of these tower floors, and other modifications, removing vents and things like that, and louvers scattered throughout the back elevation. And then the upper roof, this is the roof of the tower. There is existing cooling equipment up there today. This is the parapet that looks over the east side of the roof toward Trinity Cemetery. This is about 11 feet tall and does a very good job of actually masking the mechanical equipment that we're proposing for this upper roof from the east side. So a overall elevation, first on Trinity Place, we'll take you through the scope of work there, and then we'll go to Greenwich Street. The work on the upper floors of the building is exclusively restoration, masonry cleaning, window repair and restoration, and really the changes that we're speaking about is the ground floor infill and a few other modest changes at the base of the building, which I'll show you in detail. So an existing elevation on the top and a proposed elevation below. A few things to call out. The existing windows, those will all be retained, but we're replacing a series of doors across the base. This is a service door, currently basically a gate and a recessed door. With a new, we'll be replacing that with a new recessed door for service. And then the primary entries 1, 2, and 3, new satin stainless steel infill multi-light configuration, recessed panels and elements like that, as well as a plaque, new metal painted plaque by the main entry, and two sconces framing that main entry, and some details of that to come. A rendering illustrating that. As I mentioned, the new infill will be finished in a satin stainless steel to really sort of harken back to those historic photographs. The multi-light transom and wood and metal doors will give a bit of texture that has been missing for decades at the base of this building. Stainless steel sconces with glass lenses, and then the plaque adjacent to the main entry. A series of line drawings. I'll go through these quickly. We can come back if you've got questions. Existing on the left for the service door and proposed. Similarly for the southern entry, again, the all glass circulite infill and the new satin stainless transom and side lights and swing doors. The center bay, again, with the multi-light transom and swing doors below. Some details with a finished sample above, just detailing, showing you some of the texture and the quality of the infill that is proposed as part of the work. And then the bay to the north, similar to the one to the south. Flipping around to the Greenwich Street side, this is an overall existing elevation and an overall proposed elevation. There are modifications at the base of the building for new infill. No changes to the masonry openings at the base of the building, similar to the treatment on Trinity Place. Removal of all of the equipment up on this upper roof and construction of a setback 1-story series of pavilions that are attached on the interior. We'll talk more about that. Introduction of a series of louvers within the existing masonry openings. Right now, these windows are all non-historic, and there'll be new louvers set into this 6th floor as of the elevation, which currently and historically has served as a mechanical floor and a transfer floor above the trading hall. And then up on the tower portion, I'll share details in a moment, introduction of louvers in that vertical series, new windows, and mechanical equipment on the uppermost roof. So beginning sort of at the base, as I mentioned, there'll be new infill within the existing openings. We've looked at the historic photographs, the images of the east elevation of the original construction, and it looks like all of the infill at the base of the building was a multi-light configuration. So we're working off of those images to inform the infill design for the 2nd floor windows, which will be a 4/4 double hung window. And then across the base, similarly, it appears from some of the historic images that there were multi-light windows at the base. So within these storefront windows, these larger windows, there'll be a new infill configuration, metal and glass, similarly for the entries at the ground floor. We're proposing 3 plaques in varying sizes adjacent to these entries, as well as sconces flanking those main entries, with details of those to come. A rendering of that center entry, multi-light transom, wider side lights, swing doors, metal plaque set adjacent to the entry, attached into to mortar joints, and new light fixtures flanking the entry, finished to match the new infill. Some details, again, a series of details. I'll go through these quickly. We can come back to them with questions if you have questions. I'll just mention that we are undertaking historic finish analysis currently. So I can't tell you exactly what the finish will be, but presumably it will be a dark metal painted finish, and that will be based on the results of the historic finish analysis. Same for the treatment of the windows, both on Greenwich Street as well as Trinity Place. Some more details. This is the bay to the southernmost bay on Greenwich Street. The windows also at the ground floor. A series of details that just illustrate the signage. These are plaque elements that will be attached to the masonry at the mortar joints. Just simple painted metal signs. Turning to the upper portion, excuse me, of the Greenwich Street elevation. So again, the base of the building is down here, existing and proposed removal of all of the mechanical equipment and the construction of a one-story pavilion. This arcuated treatment obviously echoes the treatment of this monumental arch windows directly below. The addition itself will be clad in limestone, and all the infill here is a multi-light steel, painted steel infill. And then on the upper floors of the tower portion, in this line, we'll be installing louvers. We have to replace louvers that are scattered across this portion of the elevation. We'll be removing those louvers and installing new windows that match the non-historic windows. There are only a handful of those. And to us, it just made more sense to install matching windows that match those windows that are currently on this portion of the facade. And then on the upper portions, there's steel windows here, which will be restored and reinstated on this portion, removal of this big vent, and then the cooling towers and other associated mechanical equipment on this uppermost roof. Now this is a section sort of removing the addition and looking right at the back wall of the tower. So a couple things to point out. We'll be removing the windows at the base of the tower to allow for circulation from the tower portion onto the roof and the addition. That involves removing the windows and the brick beneath the windows, and we'll be removing one pier in this location to provide for a larger opening. At this bay, just to point out, there was historically a bridge that connected this tower floor, the 8th floor, to an adjacent building that has been since demolished. This bridge is sort of a bridge to nowhere right now that's being removed, and we'll be restoring the masonry in its location. A series of details. This is the new louvers that are being installed into the fire stair masonry openings. That setback will match what exists at the adjacent windows. The louvers at the 6th floor, well, there'll be a line of mechanical rooms, again, on the west side of the building facing onto Greenwich Street. An overall section of the building, the existing on the left, proposed on the right. And I'll just point out the sort of overall volume of the trading hall and sort of how much of that base and the main portion of the building that trading hall occupies. So you can see it here. There's the Greenwich Street entry at grade here, and then the trading hall directly above. Trinity Place is about one floor above, so the entry there is at a slightly higher elevation. So you get a sense of the base of the building, the towers. You can see the position of the mechanical equipment and the installations here, and then the setback roof addition here with proposed mechanicals on the upper roof. A detail section at that 7th floor roof. Presently, this unit or this construction, this mechanical room, is at about 25 feet above the roof surface and pretty much right behind the parapet. The proposed addition here is the top of the parapet is 22 feet above the roof, and it's set back because of the angle 35 and 25 feet from the parapet. There's also a proposal for a simple glass railing at the parapet line shown here in the section. And then the 6th floor here, this is the mechanical floor with venting out to the west. A floor plan at the 7th floor. This is the 7th floor of the terrace, the 7th floor of the tower. And then the existing terrace at the 7th floor, existing roof at the 7th floor with all the mechanical equipment. And the proposal here with the existing tower floor, the connection through to the addition. So there's an addition sort of offset with a piece here, and then a smaller pavilion piece here with a setback at 35 and 22 feet at this corner. Significantly different than the current setback of the existing mechanicals. A pergola set here and another extension with the generator tucked in behind it in the southwest corner of the roof. Some detail elevations at the base of the tower, sort of on the roof. Again, the existing base of the building. These are the windows that will be removed in the panels, and there's one pier, and then an elevation of the new pavilion clad in limestone with steel multi-light windows and doors. Details for all of that, all of those elements here. Happy to come back if you've got questions about the detailing of those elements. But of course, sort of very high quality, a lot of texture, thin profiles, as one would expect with a steel construction, consistent with the steel windows on the floors below. And then turning to the roof of the tower portion, this is the existing roof with mechanical equipment pushed to the west side of the roof, and this tall 11-foot parapet here on the east side. And so what we've done is we've positioned the cooling towers as far west as we can to take them out of the line of sight from the east, and to minimize as best as possible from the line of sight from the west. There's other equipment, smaller equipment, set below the height of the cooling towers, also pushed back to the west side of the roof. And then a section just illustrating that. So this is the east side at Trinity Place, the west side toward Greenwich Street. Current cooling equipment, the 11-foot tall parapet and flagpole that will remain, and then the cooling tower, which will be clad in a flat gray metal railing and cowl above, and other equipment surrounding it. So with that, we'll just look at some finished samples: the limestone of the cladding, the cooling tower paint, and then the satin stainless for the infill on Trinity Place. And then just a series of visibility studies around the building. Because of the really narrow streets and the sort of density of the blocks here, the views are all sort of partial as one moves around the building. This is a view along Carlisle Street between Greenwich and Washington Street. So presently, when you look down Carlisle, you see that 25-foot tall mechanical enclosure right at the parapet. And you can just see here above that, that's the mock-up for the cooling tower. So this is a rendered view, just illustrating the visibility of the cooling tower, and a rendered view. You can see the cooling tower, while visible, is still a secondary element on that upper roof with these towers north and south dominating these views. Further back now from the west, now this is looking all the way across the West Side Highway. Here is the existing building, the mechanical enclosure, and then a view down this slot in Carlisle Street, where you'll see a portion of the one-story pavilion on the roof. Now coming back closer to the building on Albany Street, this is from the north side of Albany. Existing view, the cooling towers, the mock-up here for the new location of the cooling towers, and then a rendered view where you can see the cooling towers and one of the smaller units adjacent, and then just a little piece of the proposed rooftop addition here shown in the rendering on the right. Now further back on Albany Street, this is again across basically across the highway. Really the only visibility is the removal of the equipment from this view. Really no new features seen, but you can see the changes to the fenestration, the new infill, the new historic windows on the upper floors. Now from Albany Street Plaza, from the northwest, again, you can see the existing equipment. This is the rendered view based on the mock-up of the cooling tower. Again, sort of a secondary element on the upper roof, and then just a portion of the pavilion peeking out over the parapet. And then from this elevated sort of non-historic view up on Liberty Park, this is about 25 feet above the street level. And we wanted to include this because you can see the top of the building and you could see the mock-up. So there'll be some visibility of the cooling equipment and visibility of the pavilion here. You'll be able to actually read the arcuated west elevation with the arched steel windows, which I think will do actually will have a nice relationship with the windows directly below. And then finally, swinging around the building, now this is on the Trinity Place side. We're east of Broadway on Pine Street, and really this is just to show that there is no visibility of any of the rooftop elements. This side of the building, the tower portion of the building, became the primary elevation when this piece was added in 1931, and we've worked hard to arrange the mechanical equipment so it's set back on the roof enough such that there is no visibility over the parapet from the east, and what's visible from the west is down these narrow streets, these sort of partial views of the building where you only see a piece of the building. So with that, I'm happy to take any questions and discuss the project further.
Great. Thank you very much. Commissioners,
Yes.
do we have any questions? Yes. Commissioner Bland, please go ahead. Oh, just
sorry, muted. I know the building pretty well. It's been kicking around empty for so long. This is very exciting to see all these restorations. How's the building going to be used?
Thank you. I'm sorry, I had that in my notes and I realized I went past that in my introduction. So the property is going to be used for a series of different uses. The main trading hall is going to be basically a food and beverage location with different venues scattered across the floor and on the existing mezzanine on the east side of the room. So that'll be basically sort of different small restaurants. And then the tower portion will be used for a variety of uses for health and wellness. There'll be meeting space and office spaces as well.
Great, thank you.
Yeah, thank you, Fred.
Other questions? Okay, we're going to now move to public testimony, and I'll turn it over to Sasha Seeley to take us through the testimony. If you're in the
Thank
meeting
you.
and would like to speak, please raise your hand so she can identify you. Go ahead, Sasha.
Thank you. Okay, so I have signed up to speak. Big Apple Group. You should be receiving a request from me now to rejoin as a panelist. You can go ahead and state your name for the record, please. You have 3 minutes to speak. And I see that you are in the meeting, so you can go ahead, just unmute your mic and turn your camera on if you wish.
Morning. Thank you to the commission for allowing me the opportunity to speak today. Thank you, Cass, for that wonderful presentation. The only thing is,
Hi, excuse, can you just please state your name for the record?
oh, I'm sorry. My name is Edward Perez. I'm the Senior Monitoring Director at the Big Apple Group. We're a small civil engineering firm here providing civil engineering solutions for historic properties and other properties alike. One thing is that Cass didn't mention how they would be addressing the highly visible cracks. The existing conditions image shows a large number of cracks, and you guys are doing a lot of work around the windows. The protection of existing structures, I know it requires a balance of providing safe limitations on existing crack widths and the effects of high vibrations without precluding the cost-effective construction methods. But it's a common problem that's confronted by engineers and architects in urban environments. The problem is more considerable when you're talking about older historic structures with brittle materials that have been used, like brick masonry, terracotta, and plaster. The age of the structure in combination with other uncertainties, like undocumented modifications to older structures, makes it potentially more susceptible to damage from proposed construction that you guys are proposing. It could result in damage to the building envelope, possibly the finishes of the existing, the exterior. And damage to the envelope is typically non-structural and nothing to raise a flag over, but it does include cracking of the exterior finishes at the mortar joints, extension of cracks, and other forms of cosmetic damage. And because the envelope is typically the primary waterproofing system for the building, this type of damage may develop into structural damage if left unchecked. On many historic structures, the building envelope is the actual building structure. So structural damage may include the loss of bearing, failure of members, partial wall collapse. Both envelope and cosmetic damage negatively affect the historic character of these structures. And that's just talking about cracks. I mean, you have the vibrations that could be, significant depending on the level and type of work that you're doing on the roof. But there's no single standard of criterion for allowable vibration levels. The New York City Department of Buildings does have the Technical Policy and Procedure Notice 1088 that gives, recommended monitoring specifications for structures like this. The Big Apple Group, we can identify the exact locations of these cracks by conducting a proper pre-existing condition survey, installing crack monitors on these existing cracks and new ones that may form during construction. We would monitor these daily as part of an optical survey routine to determine the condition of the building throughout construction. If anybody's interested in talking about these services, I could be reached at 718-767-2900, or you could read more about it at vibrationmonitoring.com. Thank you.
Thank you. Okay, I'm going to take a glance over. Is it for our signups? And I do not see any more hands raised, so there is no one else who wishes to speak.
Okay, thank you. And I'll note for the record that we received a resolution from Community Board 1 Community Board 1 in Manhattan recommending approval of the application. Cass, do you want to briefly address the cracks in the building and repairs to ensure?
Sure. Yeah.
Sound
I mean,
condition? I just want to note for the record that, of course, DOB will make final determinations on any structural conditions, but if you want to briefly address it, Cass.
Okay, Cass, would you like me to do that?
Let me do this quickly. I don't think we need to spend a lot of time on this, but I think these are all conditions that we're aware of. I think it's worth noting that our client has inherited all these conditions from the previous owner, and absolutely will be addressing these. This is, these are complex things to address, but I'll say that this project team, including Paul, our office, and our client, are experienced in working in these particular conditions. So this is in everybody's best interest to address sensitively and appropriately, and working with the staff to provide samples, et cetera, and get permits for all the work. So this is definitely on our radar and will be addressed appropriately.
Okay, great. All right, commissioners, any final questions? I am sending requests to unmute all of you so we can begin our discussion. Okay, Commissioner Gustafson, would you make a motion to close the hearing?
So moved.
Commissioner Devonshire, would you second that motion?
Second, Sarah.
All in favor, say aye.
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 Any opposed? Okay, so the hearing is closed and we'll begin our discussion. And some of you may recall, we saw a different application for this building, which involved many more significant changes. This is an application, and I think that project never went forward. And as Vice Chair Bland noted, the building has been empty. So I think it's very exciting to see a use happening here. And I think that in addition to the restoration work that will be reviewed at staff level, there are very thoughtful changes here, including changing storefront infill within existing and entrance infill within existing openings, some plaque signage, and then removing visible mechanical equipment at the roof and replacing it with a less visible addition that is designed to harmonize with the building both below and behind, and cleaning up other mechanical installations. So we'll begin our discussion. Commissioner Holford Smith, would you like to start this one?
Sure. Well, I think this is a really fantastic application. And I'm really glad to hear that this building will be used again. It's a beautiful building. I think that all the changes to the mechanical will be a vast improvement over what you can see now by hiding them up on the upper roof. And looks like they're reducing quite a number of the units. I think that the visible one-story addition on the lower portion is appropriate. It works well with the existing architecture and is subordinate to it. And I think the changes to all the fenestration, the doors are all appropriate. I really don't have anything to say except good things about this application.
Okay, great. Thank you. Commissioner Goldblum.
I agree fully with Anne. It's totally appropriate.
Okay, Commissioner Devonshire.
I agree. I think it's wonderful that this building's coming back to life.
Great. Commissioner Chen.
I agree with all the comments, long overdue, and is the applicant did an excellent job in the presentation. I can't wait to see it being restored.
Commissioner Bland.
Yeah. Well, as we all know, an empty building is a building at risk, and this building has been empty for a long time, and it's very gratifying to see it. And let's hope this round, as opposed to the last round of approvals that we did give, work out, and the building is actually, and this project proceeds. Often in an adaptive reuse, of course, we're challenged a little bit pushing the envelope to allow things that maybe sometimes might not quite feel comfortable enough, but in order to allow a use that is an adapted use, we allow it because the adaptive use is such an important piece of preservation methodology. But in this case, we don't have to stretch ourselves at all. I think it feels so natural and normal that these relatively few changes that are required make, and of course the elimination of so many egregious items up on the roof particularly is really gratifying. So this is a superb application, and I wish wish it proceeds.
Thank you, Commissioner Gustafson.
Show of hands, who else is going to miss that duct going up at the top 2 floors of the tower? I mean, that's just truly special. I think Commissioner Bland hit the nail on the head. There are no envelopes being pushed here whatsoever, and that's what we always struggle with in these adaptive reuses. I'm completely on board.
Okay, Commissioner Shamir Barron.
Yes, I agree with everything that's been said. Such a strong proposal, and it's so thorough as ever, but in this case, really positive, and I'm very much in support.
Okay, and Commissioner Chen.
Yeah, likewise here. This is really commendable.
Great. And I agree as well. And just to note specifically, I think that in addition to the egregious rooftop mechanical equipment being replaced, it's being replaced with an addition that's very sympathetic in its design and materials and will really sort of blend away as it's viewed with the taller portion behind it. And the storefronts, which we haven't talked as much about, and the signage are, I think the storefronts are taking their cues from what we think is the one historic bay at the ground floor, and also just really have a strong relationship to the large arched windows on the facade. And the plaques are simple and well scaled to this otherwise monumental facade and won't cause damage to any significant features. So I think in every respect, this is very sensitive. Commissioner Holford Smith, would you go ahead and make the motion?
Yes. In the matter of LPC 22-03172, 123 Greenwich Street, the New York Curb Exchange, incorporating the New York Curb Market Building, an individual landmark. A neo-Renaissance style monetary exchange building designed by Starrett and Van Vleck and built in 1920-21 and 1930-31. The application is to construct a rooftop addition, replace windows, and install storefront infill, louvers, and canopies. I recommend approval, finding that the proposed work will not eliminate significant historic fabric, that the proposed entrance infill on both facades will recall the original doors as documented in historic photos at the Trinity Place facade, and will be consistent with the types of doors found on buildings of this age and type in terms of configuration, materials, details, and finish. That all finishes will be based on the finish analysis. That the proposed windows at the second floor northernmost double bays of the Trinity Place facade are in keeping with the configuration and materials of the historic multi-light windows found elsewhere on this facade. That the proposed light fixtures will be installed with minimal penetrations, will be well scaled to the entrances, and will not call undue attention to themselves. That the proposed metal plaque sign will be small in size, simple in design, and typical in terms of placement. That the installation of full window louvers at the top floor of the Greenwich Street facade will not eliminate significant architectural fabric, and their installation will consolidate equipment located elsewhere at the building. That the building currently has highly visible and disruptive rooftop accretions, which will be removed, and the proposed addition will be less visible than existing mechanical equipment. That the materiality of the addition, featuring limestone cladding, steel window and door assemblies, and glass railings, will be compatible with the historic building materials. That the arched and square-headed multi-light steel windows and doors at the addition will be consistent with the scale and rhythm of the fenestration of the historic building below. That the existing masonry piers at the base of the tower elevation will be retained and preserved, marking the transition between the historic tower and new addition, and that minimal historic fabric will be removed at the tower elevation fronting Greenwich to accommodate access to the new addition. That the addition, while visible from select locations to the west, including Carlisle Street, West Street, Albany Street Plaza, and Liberty Park, will be seen in the context of a complex roofscape and will relate well to the architecture of the building. That mechanical equipment proposed to be installed at the high roof fronting Trinity Place will not be visible over the Trinity Place facade due to the presence of a high parapet, and where visible over the low roof fronting Greenwich Street will be seen in conjunction with the secondary facade from select vantage points to the west, and that the work will not detract from the special architectural or historic character of the individual landmark.
Thank you. And Commissioner Shamir Barron, would you second that motion?
Second.
Thank you. And Mark, will you call the vote?
Chair Carroll,
Aye.
Commissioner Bland,
Aye.
Commissioner Shamir Barron,
Aye.
Commissioner Chen,
Aye.
Commissioner Devonshire,
Aye.
Commissioner Goldblum,
Aye.
Commissioner Gustafson,
Aye.
Commissioner Holford Smith.
Aye.
With 8 in favor, none opposed, the motion passes.
All right, that's approved. Thank you, and we wish you the
Thank
best
you.
of luck.
Thank you
All
all.
right, thanks. We'll move to the next item.
Okay, next item is public hearing item number 3, LPC 22-00769, application for a certificate of appropriateness in the Borough of Manhattan, Block 636, Lot 41, 396 West Street in the Weehawken Street Historic District. This is a neo-Renaissance style hotel designed by Charles Stegmeyer and built in 1903 to 1904. And the application is to install storefront infill and signage, alter the facade, and construct a rooftop addition.
Hey, commissioners, the applicants have entered the hearing. They now have control of the screen. You just need to click on your screen and you may advance the slides with your arrow keys. Please unmute yourself, state your name for the record, and you may begin. Michael, you are unmuted and you are controlling the presentation.
I don't think he's unmuted.
Right, he's muted. I'm sorry. Michael, you're still muted?
I can hear me okay.
Yes, thank you. Could you state your name for the record, please? And you may begin.
Hi, this is Michael Kipfer with Mancini Duffy Architecture. And we have a couple other people who will chime in throughout the presentation. Would you like to introduce them now or at their time to speak?
You can do either. If you want to quickly do it now, that's fine. Before each of them speaks, they should restate their name for the record.
Okay, we'll have them state their name as they speak then.
Okay, thank you.
So today we'll be talking about 396 West Street. It is in the Weehawken Street Historic District. You can see there's the West Side Highway here and 10th Street. So it's right next to the Hudson River along that kind of very busy corridor with the West Side Highway. So we are in the Weehawken Street Historic District. It's a nice settled district along the West Side Highway with Weehawken Street and 10th Street, mainly being the boundaries. And it is an existing building, 3 stories with a pressed metal cornice and various terracotta and masonry work into it. So, you know, the interesting part of this building is that it is in a flood zone. And so it is very exposed to kind of all of the conditions that are coming off of the Hudson River and the surrounding areas. More specifically, you know, from the zoning aspect of this project, there's a big consideration into flood resiliency. So we are proposing in this project to do all the necessary work to make sure that this building is properly protected from now and into the future. And so a big part of this application is relocating and reallocating some of the FAR from the areas that we are protecting through the flood resiliency into a rooftop addition. And I'll speak to that here in a little bit. So the main goals of this presentation is obviously to make the building safer, code compliant, and flood resilient. We want to make sure that it's ADA accessible. We want to make sure that there's proper egress in and out of the building. We also want to maintain and restore the building envelope in keeping with the historic design in the historic context. So we are proposing through staff level various facade repairs, structural issues, and making the building in general more uniform and more appropriate to its historical context. And then we also want to promote wellness and interior comfort through building upgrades. So we are, you know, giving fresh mechanical systems, improving access to fresh air, and really just making it a kind of a Class A building to attract future tenants. So in general, just through a couple quick sketches and diagrams, you can kind of see the existing building shell and the new elevator that we're proposing to put in the building to make sure that every single floor on the building is ADA accessible. And then we're also adding 2 stair towers into the building so that there are 2 means of egress from each floor, one of which the current building does not have. So you can kind of see how all of that interworks within the building's program. And then for the flood resiliency, you can see the existing building and the current flood elevation that is on it. The flood elevation goes up to about halfway through the first floor. It is currently not protected. So a big part of the scope is to put the proper flood barriers and ties, structural tie downs and the liner walls in there to make sure that the floor, so that the building is properly protected. I will mention that these flood barriers that are proposed are deployable. So there's really nothing on the facade that is hindered except for a couple sidewalk tie downs that are very, very minimal in nature. And we do have a detail of them back in the appendix if we have to get to that. And then there's the structural tie downs that are going down into the bedrock to make sure that the building doesn't uplift with all the pressure coming from the water. And then kind of the redistribution of all of the building services that come out of making this a flood resilient building, bringing everything back up to bringing the electrical and the mechanical room up into the upper floors, and then putting all of the rooftop equipment upstairs as they can't go inside the cellar. So now we're going to have Gregory, our historical consultant, to come on and kind of talk about the building's history.
Great, thanks, Michael. Gregory Dietrich of Gregory Dietrich Preservation Consulting. And this building was designed by Charles Stegmeyer, a Swiss-born architect who designed a lot of early middle-class apartment houses on the Upper East and Upper West sides during the late 19th century. This particular building was completed in 1904. It was originally built as the Holland Hotel by a restaurateur saloon proprietor. And in fact, the ground floor originally housed a saloon and a liquor store, while the second floor housed approximately 17 hotel rooms, and the third floor housed about 19 hotel rooms. Thank you. So the Holland typified the development trend during the early 20th century, when the Hudson River essentially surpassed the East River as really the primary maritime commerce activity in New York City. And in fact, this manifested itself in quite a busy commercial corridor along West Street. And this building's considered a rare example of the Hudson River hotels that flourished during the early 20th century, this period of this heightened commercial maritime activity. Also included the Hotel Christopher, O'Neill's Hotel, the Keller Hotel as well within the vicinity. And this photo in particular on the left, I think, is quite revealing about really what I would call the honky-tonk nature of this activity during this time, and certainly was manifested in multiple alterations to the storefront of this building, as we can see through the various photos over time. So during the 20th century, the Holland Hotel was alternately known as the Clyde Hotel and then later the New Holland Hotel. And the hotel eventually closed in 1993. After undergoing some substantial alterations to the storefront and retail space, between the 1930s and 40s, it housed a men's clothing store and a barber shop. And then later, first floor tenants included a building contractor, a food store, a diner, and a uniform clothing store. Slide. By 1972, the ground floor housed a gay bar and grill, and most recently housed a series of restaurants. But today it is a vacant space. And so now I'll hand it back to Michael.
Thanks, Gregory. So, really, throughout the building's history, it's had a lot of different typologies, and I think more specifically down on the ground floor, it's kind of undergone a lot of different programs and kind of ground floor facade updates. So in this application, we're really going to be focusing on the ground floor and kind of bringing kind of a consistent uniform nature to the ground floor, as it's undergone a lot of different uses in its past. I will mention through staff level, we have kind of proposed a full restoration of the historic envelope. So that has been submitted as part of this application to the staff in this. So that was the south view, and here is a west view of the building as it stands today. So now into kind of the design of everything. And I think one thing that's really important to understand here is the multiple types of contexts that this building and the atmosphere involve. At the very front of the site, you have this very kind of uniform, intimate scale at the foreground. And then obviously it's combated with a very kind of complex background that's going through a lot of different building typologies and hierarchies. And really this is a unique site because you kind of get this huge section with the West Side Highway kind of carving out this full, visible section of the end of West Street here that, through the winter time, without the trees, is very visible from different parts of the piers and the network of sidewalks and bike paths that go by it. So in this design, we really focused on two scales. One is more of the intimate scale up in the Weehawken district itself, and then the other is more, from the far contextual design of the whole space and the whole view that you see. So a couple themes that we're going to be going over. Obviously, like mentioned before, historic restoration proposed to this kind of this historic envelope, really just trying to make sure that we keep this as restored as possible through staff level. We are proposing to reorient the entry that goes up to the upper floors to 10th Street. Most of the pedestrian traffic to come down and access the site is down here on 10th Street. The west side is really mainly for car traffic. And so we don't think that's appropriate to have the main entry to the upper floors be on the west side, as most of the pedestrian traffic is coming from the east. And then bringing that consistent identity to the ground floor. As you saw through that historical timeline, there's a lot of different window typologies, and trying to kind of bring consistency to the ground level is something that we're trying to do in this presentation and in this concept. And then up when we do talk about the addition, trying to find contemporary ties with historic context, finding a rhythm through the natural piers of the windows and bringing those up into the penthouse is something that we really focused on. Here you can kind of just see the history of all the different typologies down on the ground level. There really isn't one consistent setting that one could say that the ground floor is really identified with. And so we're more or less with this diagram trying to show that, we want to bring consistency down here. To do that, we kind of looked at two very unique typologies that exist on the ground floor. You have a punched window typology below a brick corbelline that's in a masonry enclosure. And then you have storefront typologies that, while different, with the way that the mullions are profiled, you can definitely tell that there's these typologies coming along on the ground floor. So our goal is to take those two typologies and really try to create a consistent rhythm with everything, with your masonry punch window and your more traditional storefront window. Zooming up a little bit closer, obviously we included a heavier frame that's referencing a more historic, appropriate profile for a ground floor window at this time. And then we are addressing kind of that signage band up top, and introducing a masonry cornice with a striped corbelling pattern to kind of introduce the ground floor as more of a historic rehabilitation, and then the upper floors as the restoration. Here you can kind of see everything come in into play. You have the south facade here and the west facade there. We are introducing, there is an existing door that goes into the ground floor. We're going to restore that. And then we are proposing to add an additional door here on the west side so that we can get the egress stair that we added into the building out onto the street. We are restoring a door opening that was here on the corner. And then you can see kind of that exposed cast iron column that's coming out of the building that we'll be keeping into this project. And then over here, you can see the new south entry from on the southeast of the building that will take you through a lobby and get you up to the upper floors. Here you can kind of just see an overall scope diagram of everything that's involved in this project. Obviously, through staff level, we've gone through the window details. We are replacing all of the windows in here into a historically appropriate window type that has been going through staff level. And then you have the ground floor storefront rehabilitation, and then obviously an addition to the roof. So to quickly go into more of the details of the openings, once again, you can see everything on the upper floors, but then what we're focusing on today is these storefronts and entries. We've gone through and kind of mapped out all the scope that's going on, and then we've given general dimensions and profiles of all the different typologies that are going in here. We do have more zoomed in details in the appendix if we need to talk to them. But in general, this just gives overall dimensions of the window or the storefront openings. And you can see that kind of heavier historic frame that's going in there to make it more appropriate to add that kind of beveling detail of the older windows. And then all the windows are being proposed to match similar dimensions as we've seen in the existing condition. Here's more of that punched profile that's coming in at those specific bays. And then the new entry on the south side, the southeast side, with a transom area that calls out for the main entry for the upper floors. Another punch typology that does have a door on it, and we're just kind of recreating that door into a consistent system. And then going to the corner, the historical corner door that goes into the ground floor, and you can see kind of that cast iron column that's coming down. So we're proposing to make that similar. And then trying to restore this west side entry into a similar composition. And then this is that new entry on the west side that helps you get egress the building from the new exit stair. We are calling for this to be 4 feet instead of your traditional 3 feet, so that the flood barriers, the removable flood barriers in the event of a flood could fit into this and go to a storage nook inside the building. Now onto the rooftop addition. So before we go into the design, I'd like to have Gregory back on and talk about some of the precedent research we did for this project.
Hi again. So really what I wanted to see was what would be relevant counterparts in, for the most part, the immediate vicinity. So I looked at the Greenwich Village Historic District, the Gansevoort Market Historic District, and the Weehawken Historic District, along with a couple of isolated examples as realized in individual landmarks. So in the top 2 photos, this is really an example of some rooftop additions that are somewhat masked from the public right of way. Of course, in some cases, the diminutive scale of some of the village streets really helps the non-visibility, I should say, of the rooftop additions. I was actually more interested in seeing 32 Morton Street in the lower right-hand corner, just because it has such an open view shed. And so the extent to which rooftop additions, such as on this building, read. And then, of course, in terms of building typology, 150 Barrow Street, the Keller Hotel, which is currently under construction, have this rooftop addition proposed and approved. So this is actually a more direct counterpart. Moving on into the Gansevoort Market Historic District, really because there is such a gamut of wildly creative rooftop additions in this district. It's primarily looking at the scale of the buildings themselves with respect to rooftop additions. So primarily looking at these buildings on 14th Street, the wildly creative Diane von Furstenberg showroom. But then in the upper right, there is a rooftop addition there that is somewhat dwarfed by the billboard on top of it. That would be the little black area that's as seen right here. And then we have a more substantial rooftop addition on 14th Street. Apologies for 55 Gansevoort in the lower left-hand corner. This is one that's under construction. And as such, you don't really get a sense of exactly what that rooftop addition is in terms of mass. And then coming back to the Greenwich Village Historic District, we have this example on Jane Street, certainly highly visible. And then on Washington Street, also highly visible with quite an open view shed as well. Also in the Greenwich Village District, we see some that benefit from landscaping. On the top, the street landscaping, and then on the bottom, the rooftop landscaping itself. But the rooftop addition is actually in this area and really can only get a glimpse of that. And then lastly, further afield down in Tribeca, this individual landmark also showing rooftop addition that is somewhat comparable to our proposal, albeit a little bit higher.
Thanks, Gregory. So I'll chime back in with kind of explaining the design of the penthouse and how it relates to the building itself. Here, once again, talking about the masonry piers that we've inserted in here, we're really trying to find, a contextual relationship to the historic nature, but also bring contemporary ties to it. So you can see we kind of selected a uniform rhythm from the existing windows to pull up into the penthouse, so that someone could say that that is a part of this building. There is a operable corner to this building, and if you look back at the building itself, it has a unique corner at the southwest side, and so we wanted to make sure the penthouse spoke to kind of a difference in character at the corner, and so we inset this corner to make sure that that's apparent. We also played with the penthouse itself in the curtain wall, whereas the upper mullion of the curtain wall starts to tie back to the top of the building and starts to recede into the sky. We really looked at, all buildings have a top to them, right? And in this case, we have a very pronounced metal cornice cap to the historical part of the building. We didn't want to compete with any type of other coping or cornice cap on this. Rather, we wanted to use this slope that recedes into the sky to start to reveal different types of contemporary character that could come out of this. Here you can see the brick piers starting to become more pronounced as the facade leans back, adding character to the building, but not trying to take away from the historical character of the floors below. Here you can see an offset that happens up on the terrace. more or less just trying to be, cognizant to the fact that we don't want the penthouse to be aligned with any type of facade of the historical reference plane. We wanted that to become a new plane in itself. Another interesting detail as we move to the interior, just to show this, we are not proposing a spandrel glass. We are proposing a same type of glass that's used on this lower portion of the mullion profile. And that's more or less to make sure that there's no difference in finish from the exterior and the interior once the mullion starts to tie back. So we've offset our structure to make sure that the glass can recede up there, and you kind of get the same level of detail. Here, just focusing more on the operable corner, you have the corner of the historic building in this operable corner, as well as another character defining feature of this penthouse. Here are just some rendered elevations of the penthouse. And what I think is really interesting about this is, as you get closer to the historical context of this building inside the Weehawken street and up close to the building, the penthouse is really trying to play along kind of that pattern of not only, the new storefront system that we're putting in and the masonry cornice, but once again, just the ties of those piers and the toothing that you see up on there. Here is an elevation from both sides of the building. You can see how we've tried to offset the penthouse to make sure that it's known that is not part of the historical features of the building. Just a section through the building as well. You can see some core elements, taking you up throughout the building. And then we get to a more detailed section of the penthouse itself. One thing that we really tried here is to try to set this penthouse as low as possible. We were able to achieve that by actually reworking some of how the roof is structurally held up, where we're keeping the existing ceiling joists from the third floor, and we're actually just doubling up some of the joists. What that allows us to do is get rid of a cavity that normally is there, so that the waterproofing can slope in a certain direction. We're able to build right on top of those joists by structurally supporting them, and we're able to have our penthouse actually start far lower than what the existing roof and finished roof is. We're also able, by lowering that, to make sure that the existing cornice and parapet act as the code required guardrail to have someone on there. By that, we avoid any type of additive guardrail to the top of the cornice, so that won't come into the sight line. Another thing we did was get rid of a parapet on the actual addition. Instead, we went for OSHA approved guardrail, and through the building code, if you don't do a parapet, you have to have a guardrail within 6 feet of the edge. We thought the guardrail was a little bit more transparent, and we really didn't want any type of solid edge to that, as we wanted this to recede into the sky and allow for those masonry piers to provide that detail. And then with the elevator overrun, we did spec an elevator that has a minimal overrun, so that would help with any type of sight line. And then for the actual penthouse rooftop itself, once again, you can see that that 6 foot offset guardrail in place of any type of parapet that's needed. You can see how the glass is sloping up. And you can see that we tried to offset all of the mechanical equipment as far to the northeast corner as possible, which is the least visible part of our roof. So making sure that the elevator placement and overrun is strategically placed so that all of our mechanical equipment can get tucked as far back as possible was a big goal in designing the core of this building. Now on to some of our view shed visibility studies. So here you can see the way this is kind of laid out is you have the map of where we are. On the top left, you can see the existing photo with no mock-up or render. Then we have a 3D mock-up, a digital mock-up that is of the proposed penthouse. And then we do have a physical mock-up as well. One thing that, you can kind of immediately see in this is that, there's a lot of different types of contexts and typologies in this area. So making sure that it's apparent that this penthouse speaks to the building at which it is on top of and into its own context, and not getting caught up in all the various surrounding context was important to us. Making sure that it's kind of a neutral setting that's not taking away from any character of the building. So that one was just across the street on the bicycle path. This one's a little bit farther south. You can see our building back up here in front of kind of all the different types of billboards and signs. Like I said, that, this is kind of a huge section cut through the city as it exposes itself to all of the pedestrian paths and bicycle paths. So it is left a bit exposed. But once again, it's less exposed as you get closer to the building, and it's more exposed as you get outside of the district into kind of this large kind of city scale view. Here, we're right across the street. We're actually on the bicycle path here, so not really a pedestrian path, but we wanted to make sure it was documented. Once again here, you can kind of see the articulated detail of the historical facade and the articulated detail of the penthouse try to speak to each other, and more or less materials, try to speak to each other as well. Down here, you can see the mock-up as well. Moving along a little bit north of the building, you can start to see the different types of terracing of the frontage. Making sure that the mock-up or the design of the penthouse is not confused with the frontage of our actual building, making sure that it is offset and in the backdrop of everything was a big goal of this design. Making sure that we have, appropriate masonry at party walls and things like that for all the different views. Now we're down on Weehawken Street looking up. Once again, as you get more intimate to the building, the penthouse isn't necessarily as exposed as it is when you're far back on the walkways. But here, we were able to get a picture kind of in winter time to see how this relates to the building. And then further down Weehawken Street, you can kind of see the mock-up and the penthouse in those pictures. And then walking up eastward toward on 10th Street, with the slope of everything in this large building in the way, there wasn't too much visible, especially with the trees. And then getting all the way up toward Washington Street and 10th Street. This is now just photos of the mock-up, as we didn't have rendered photos. So you can kind of see 8, 9, and 10 kind of surrounding it. Once again, this is with the physical mock-up. When you're up close, intimate with the building in the district, it's hard to see that there's a penthouse at all because of the offset that we did from the edge. Coming out toward the piers, I think this is a really interesting view. You kind of see everything but the actual building here, but you definitely just perceive the skyline and the context of everything. Here just is more for record keeping. This was the schematic sent to the mock-up builders. So this is what they build off of, and it matches all the scale of our design for the physical mock-up. You can see the elevator bulkhead and the perimeter walls of the penthouse with their offset from the building's edge. Just a couple more renders in, I guess, wintertime, more or less, without leaves on the trees. We wanted to make sure that, we weren't just rendering out a bunch of summertime trees. Once again, I think, the kind of rhythm of the storefront downstairs and the rhythm of this recessed curtain wall, I think has a lot of similarities to help tie everything together. Then going down south, starting to see how the penthouse plays with, the storefront and the masonry piers. Going across the street on the bicycle path, seeing how the penthouse starts to come into elevation with the existing building. And then kind of more of an angled view across the street, showing the penthouse and the visibility through the winter trees.
Great. All right. Do you want to do the signage and quickly, okay, and the camera quickly, because I think we need to get to questions.
Okay. Yeah. Getting to the signage, historically, there's really always just been this hotel marquee blade sign. We're seeking to take that same inspiration and rehabilitate it to a slim profile to hang off of the building. So that's I think that's the only signage that's not at staff level in this presentation. And that's
great. Thank you. All right, Commissioner Goldblum, please go ahead.
Okay. Some questions about the base. Your frieze that you're proposing with the corbelling, that's new brick, right? You're removing the existing brick and putting in new?
Yes. Yes.
And are you removing the existing brick because it's in poor condition or for aesthetic reasons?
The existing brick was it was a different type of backer brick. It wasn't the original type of brick. It is in very poor condition, and so we're attempting to just remove that brick and replace with more of a finished brick in place.
So the brick that's there now is not a finished brick. It's a rough brick, like a back of the building kind of brick.
Yes. We believe that there used to be some type of signage band on the building, so that this brick wasn't necessarily always exposed. Obviously, through its history, it's become exposed. So that's why we want to remove that and replace it with a masonry application,
right,
but still provide some detailing in it.
Let me ask you a question. When I look at your examples of photographs, that band seems to be more or less always exposed, except at the northernmost end of West Street, where the metal storefront kind of creeps up and has its own cornice covering it. The brick that's there now is a different brick from that which is shown in the photographs in the 20s and 30s?
It seems to be the same brick. It's just, I think it's always been covered.
And
I believe we have Nancy on the line too. If Nancy, if you want to speak to more of the historical context of that brick. She's our structural facade consultant.
Great.
Nancy, you're muted.
I don't think Nancy joined the hearing.
Okay.
Well, so did you ever strip a sec? I noticed that it's now painted. Has it been stripped and exposed so that the staff could see what that condition is?
Yes, and we have that in the appendix.
Okay, great.
Commissioner Goldblum, if I could just jump in, the designation report does also suggest that that area was originally covered with either some sort of signage band or a cornice, and the photos and site visits do confirm it is kind of a common backup brick that you would see, not intended to be exposed.
Got it. Okay, great. That's very helpful. Thank you. And in terms of the rooftop addition, a lot of the renderings show a kind of a white backdrop behind the topmost portion of the addition. I assume that is what you're seeing is the painted sheetrock soffit inside that's enclosing the structure. Is that right? When you see that from the distant
Yeah.
views?
Yeah, it's a finished edge of the soffit. Yes.
Great.
Interior.
All right, thank you. Thank you very much.
Thank you.
Great, thank you. Any other questions? Okay, I don't see any other questions. We'll move to public testimony. We may have more after that. So I am going to turn it over to Sasha Seeley to take us through the testimony. If you're in the meeting and would like to speak on this item, please raise your virtual hand so she can identify you. And we'll start with anyone who signed up in advance.
Thank
Sasha?
you. Thank you. Okay, so I'm going to call on Zach Weinstein. Zach, you should have received a request for me to join in as a panelist. You can go ahead and unmute your mic, state your name for the record. You have 3 minutes to speak.
Yes, is my microphone working?
Yes, it is. You're all set.
Great, thank you. Yes, my name is Zach Weinstein. I'm co-chair of the Greenwich Village Community Task Force, which was one of the organizations which led the effort to create the Weehawken District back in 2006. I'm going to restrict my comments to the rooftop addition, and got seriously concerned about this addition, and those concerns are twofold. First of all, the addition itself would not contribute in any way to the historic character of the district, and the applicant in his presentation makes no attempt to relate this proposed addition to the history of the district. I think that there is a fundamental misreading in the applicant's presentation of the nature of the Weehawken district. At a couple of points this afternoon, the applicant referred to the western boundary of the district as, quote, a section cut through the city, and it was presumably cut by the construction of the West Side Highway. This was not a section cut through the city. What we're looking at here is the Hudson River waterfront. It's the waterfront edge of Manhattan. It's a waterfront district. And the history of the district and the character of the district is completely intertwined with that late 19th and early 20th century history. This glass addition would increase the height of this historic 3-story brick building by approximately 30 to 35%. It would be very substantially and highly visible, and it in no way reflects the history or character or the built architecture of the existing district. Second of all, approving this proposed addition would threaten the integrity of the entire district. Significantly, every single one of the comparable additions that is displayed by the applicant is outside of the Weehawken Street Historic District. There's not a single reference to any existing structure or any architectural feature that currently exists within the Weehawken Street existing district. And there's a reason for this. There are currently no other rooftop additions remotely like this, remotely visible in the Weehawken Street Historic District. The Weehawken Street District is a very small district. There are only 14 buildings. And if this district is approved, it would set a precedent for allowing similar highly visible large additions on every other low-lying building within the district. By my count, in the district, there are, of the 14 existing buildings, 6 of them are 3 stories or less. And you're opening up the doorway here to allowing highly visible additions on top of all 6 of those buildings. Now, significantly, a number of the rooftop additions that the applicant cited as possible context are up in the Gansevoort Historic District, whereas the commissioners know rooftop additions are out of control. An initial addition was approved. It set a precedent. Developers have come in on every other low-lying building in the Gansevoort District, pointing to the previous additions that were accepted by the commission and going on those precedents, allowing the construction of new additions. This, again, it's a small, tiny, low-lying waterfront historic district, and Weehawken should be protected for what it is, and its historic character should be protected, and additions of the sort.
Is that, we're going over our 3-minute time now. I'm going to have to ask you to wrap up, okay?
I'm done. I think.
Okay, awesome. All right, thank you so much. Okay, next I'll be calling on Anna Markham from Village Preservation. Anna, you should receive a request from me to rejoin as a panelist. All you have to do is state your name for the record. Turn on your camera if you wish. You have 3 minutes to speak. Okay, and I see that you are in the meeting. Okay.
Hello, can you all see and hear me?
Yes, we can. You're all set.
Okay, wonderful. Good afternoon, or I guess midday, commissioners, and thank you for the opportunity to testify. My name is Anna Markham, and I am the Director of Research and Preservation at Village Preservation, speaking on behalf of the organization today. Village Preservation commends the thoughtful elements of the historic building restoration at the core of this project, but objects to some of the details, including the aluminum windows and certain features of the rooftop addition. We echo Community Board 2's suggestion that the window replacements be wood windows of a historical design. In particular, the curved windows on the third floor should be carefully reproduced to fit the historic window openings. The rooftop addition, while improved from what was originally presented at Community Board 2 in September, is still not quite where we would like it. The inclusion of masonry vertical elements breaking up the windows and echoes of the historic cornice in the addition's cornice greatly benefit the design. However, the proposed addition is still highly visible from multiple angles, especially the public park across the street from Weehawken Street, which intersects it. We recommend considering reducing it in size and setting it back further. We are also concerned about the potential emission of light from this glassy addition. While LPC's purview is limited in this regard, we have concerns about how a glowing box atop this building would impact the Weehawken Historic District. Thank you.
Thank you. Okay, next I will be calling on Historic District Council. You should be receiving a request from me to rejoin as a panelist. I see you're in the meeting. You can go ahead, state your name for the record. You have 3 minutes to speak.
Hi, good afternoon. My name is Diego Roballo and I work for the Historic Districts Council. HDC is supportive of the proposed modifications and repairs. However, we are confused about the change proposed to the decorative cast iron column at the corner and whether its original shape and capital details are being maintained or not. Additionally, we are not in favor of the removal of the corbelled details on the rounded corner bay. The loss of these details detracts from the integrity of the original design. As for the proposed penthouse addition, we find it to be generally sensitive, but have to ask if there is any way to reduce its visibility even further. Thank you.
Thank you. Okay, next, John Graham. I am sending you a request to rejoin as a panelist. Okay, I see you're in the meeting, John. You can go ahead and state your name for the record. You have 3 minutes to speak. All you have to do. Yep.
Good afternoon, Commissioners. John Graham from the Victorian Society in New York. This beautiful, if somewhat excessive presentation isn't matched by the quality of the proposed design. The extensive historical analysis and visualization exercise, the wintertime renderings are exquisite, have resulted in a proposal that gives us a large and highly visible rooftop addition on a historic building, the missing and altered historic features of which are not restored, but replaced in different ways, none of them in keeping with the building's original design or style. Of particular note is the failure to provide for a cornice above the storefronts and to base the storefronts themselves on the lovely projecting originals. Other problematic details include the windows, the narrow ones in the corner bay losing so much glazed area that they'll appear as little more than slits, and the strange asymmetric configuration of the northernmost 2 ground floor bays of the West Street facade. A more preservation-oriented approach to this building is needed for this project to approach appropriateness. Thank you, Commissioners.
Thank you. Okay. That is our signups. Let me just take a look over. I don't see any additional hands raised for anyone who wishes to speak. All righty. Thank you.
All right, thank you, Sasha. And I'll note for the record, we also received a resolution from Manhattan Community Board 2 recommending denial of the aluminum frame windows, preferring wood, and denial of the rooftop addition, asking for an addition to be less visible in height and a design more harmonious with the background surrounding buildings. Okay, I'd like to turn back to the applicant team and ask if you'd like to respond to any of these comments.
Yes, this is Michael again. I think we just wanted to clarify that the arch windows have been changed so that they are arch on the header. And that was, corresponded through the staff, our staff representing us on this. And we did, from the community board to hearing, alter the rooftop design with the masonry piers and the tilting of the glass to both incorporate context from the building itself. And while we don't think context from the background is important to this, we did, through it at some of the other mock-up renderings, you can see that it does have more of a neutral correspondence with the background. But mainly we wanted to focus on a contemporary element that complements the historic context.
Okay.
Yeah, and I would just like to add to that, that of course, what we do not want to do is blur the lines of history with respect to the new versus the old. So of course, the intention here was to make a distinction between what is historic and the new rooftop addition. And also while referencing what we would call character defining features. So for instance, the cantilever that you see in this rounded corner bay of the historic building cantilevering over the public right-of-way is then referenced in a modern, more abstracted way in the rooftop addition. Similarly, the former sign band, this striped, what we were calling corbelling, also brick relief, actually has precedent in the historic photographs. We see that detail actually in a section along West Street. And if you look, this is actually a good example in terms of the photo. The clear story of this rooftop addition also sort of references that particular character defining feature. So I hope that the community isn't completely dismissing the idea that this was just built in designed in a vacuum.
Okay, thank you. Commissioners, do we have any final questions? All right, I'm sending you requests to unmute yourselves so we can close the hearing and begin our discussion. Okay, Commissioner Shamir Barron, would you make a motion to close the hearing?
So moved.
And Commissioner Chen, would you second that motion?
Second.
All in favor, say aye.
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 Any opposed? Okay, we're going to begin our discussion. And so as we've heard, this application includes work throughout to adaptively reuse this building. And that includes at the storefront level, some signage, windows, and the rooftop addition, which has all been presented very thoroughly to us. So we'll begin our discussion. Commissioner Bland, would you start this one?
Certainly. Well, I think this is an uncommonly handsome building, which has just been, which is being proposed to really up its ante in terms of a beautiful building. And I hope I'm not being persuaded by what has been noted already as beautiful renderings. They are. But I think the color combinations particularly are very attractive, and I hope they are pretty much based on reality. I'm persuaded that maybe we should consider, because of the low height and the historic quality of what we see here, actual wood windows might be preferable to what's been proposed in the aluminum. And I guess the real issue, the controversy, seems to be around the rooftop addition. As you might have suspected, I'm not against the rooftop addition per se. I think it won't necessarily have to be a precedent for other lower buildings in the neighborhood. Every building has its own set of conditions, and I think this building has a set of conditions which allow the rooftop addition to be visible, yes, and maybe slightly less visibility would be helpful. We'll wait for others to weigh in on that subject, but we're seeing it in many cases in front of other taller buildings. So I think that helps me at least accept this as part of an overall cityscape as opposed to just the purity of it. But in this case, I do want to say, because I don't want to confuse people with my consistency of the rooftop addition idea, often seeing a rooftop addition as this rendering shows it very clearly, might be viewed as interfering with a very beautiful and elaborate cornice. And that's one of my pet peeves. So, but I think you don't see it always like this. Of course, you never see a building in a static way. You move and you see it in a kinetic way. I still think that the rooftop addition has been carefully designed and thoughtfully designed. It's not just a piece of glass, and I think I'm okay with it. It would be acceptable to me to see less of it, but it may be not acceptable to many others to see it at all. So we'll just have to wait and see.
Okay, thank you. And I do want to note that the windows are being reviewed at staff level based on what we know about them at this point.
Yeah.
But we'll take a closer look at that. Okay, Commissioner Gustafson.
Boy, we are creatures of habit. I'm so used to having two people in between me and Commissioner Bland. Let's see. Let's just talk first about the rooftop addition. I agree with Commissioner Bland on the design of the rooftop addition. I think it does need to be reduced somewhat. It's not a very tall building, and as testimony said, adding 30% to the top of it is quite a bit. And it's got two issues, which is to say the issue Commissioner Bland raised, which is in the nearer views, the disruption of the view of an incredibly beautiful cornice. And then two is that it's visible from so many places. It's to such a degree. Sometimes you're unlucky that your building is in this kind of location, but it is what it is. And the things that it hides behind us, part of those things are things that are that we want to see on the facades and sides of the other buildings behind it. I think it needs to be reduced somewhat. Although I'm not opposed to a rooftop addition completely. That is not, I'm okay with an addition in the design of this one. Commissioner Bland did not mention something that that was sticking in my craw, and I think probably Commissioner Goldblum's as well, which was the brick detail they're adding in what they referred to as the former sign band. Often we're looking at buildings that don't have a lot of detail and can bear the addition of more. And this building has a lot going on this facade. And it will have more going on because of the way they've done the storefronts, the way they've designed the storefronts. And I'm not sure that this isn't gilding the lily. It just might be too much. I am looking forward to hearing what Commissioner Goldblum has to say about that. And finally, I do appreciate the applicants giving us the history of the building. I'm thoroughly amused that we had a saloon and a liquor store in the bottom of one building. A full service operation. Perhaps we're going to start going back to that kind of thing. Anyway, that's where I am.
Okay, thank you. Commissioner Shamir Baran.
Yes, and this district has a really interesting, crazy history of prisons and tobacco fields and many things. So, so I must say that I do think that the rooftop addition is problematic per se, just that way, because the building didn't have this kind of addition of expression on the roof, because the cornice is so dominant, wants to be dominant. It sort of makes the point at the corner at the end of this block that defines it. The cornice does. So, but I have to admit, really confused about my positions about rooftop additions, visibility, those that are visible especially. So I think in this case, I would say that there should be no visibility, as much as limited as possible, but I would say almost to none of the rooftop addition. And so would need to be significantly set back and lowered. You know, there is this kind of moment where I look at it and I think, especially in this one rendering, where it sort of, if you squint enough, it almost starts to look like it might be sort of part of the cornice, which is exactly what we typically don't want for it to do. That is the new resembling or sort of being, you know, looking like the old. And yet there is something sort of, maybe that could be an approach here, which seems strange and contrary to the other kind of approaches that we've approved historically. So I think in this case, I do have a problem with visibility, and I would want for it to be made as visible as possible.
Muted. Thank you. Commissioner Holford Smith.
Yes, thank you. I also have some issues with the appropriateness of the addition. And I think if we go to slide 57, it shows a view that is really kind of jarring. And I think it has also to do with the design, which I appreciate the architects trying to tie in the design of the penthouse with the architecture of the building below. But I think that it really detracts and it calls undue attention. If you have the next page, if you look at the bottom left image, where you see the, I think part of it is the angle of that sort of the prow of the penthouse that juts out, really dominates the historic buildings. So I think that's quite problematic, as well as I think the incorporation of brick and putting the white painted chipboard behind the storefront, actually it draws more attention to it. So I think there's a few things going on there that need to be addressed. As for the storefront, I had a similar reaction to the brick detailing that Commissioner Goldblum did. I was wondering where that came from. And I have to say, I've only studied the building for a few minutes, not the months that the architects have, but it seems like that was consistently a smooth band. I'd like to have more information about that, and would like them to bring it back more to what the original appearance was. And similarly with the storefronts, I think they're showing quite a bit of flat aluminum, which it may end up being just sort of too much aluminum and might need some more detail. I think using the brick detailing that they're showing is really nice. I just wonder if there are more probes to be done to try to figure out what the original conditions were there.
Okay, thank you. Commissioner Goldblum.
Thank you. Very interesting conversation about a very interesting little building. I really like this building because it's so raffish and rough and kind of a really good example, like tenements. You know, it has a lot in common with tenements. You know, it uses the classical language in a very accessible and kind of straightforward way with textures and probably off-the-shelf detailing, in a way that winds up being rather robust and a little bit, you know, not super refined. It's not a McKinley and White, but it's got a quality that reminds us of its waterfront past. And I worry about gussying it up in such a way that it takes that waterfront history away from it and makes it a little bit too posh. I think that, starting with the rooftop, I think that the applicant's making his problems worse by using the design vocabulary that they have chosen with this very insistent rhythm of storefront elements that is capped with a black and white checkerboard cornice, basically. I think if you look at most of the views, my eye anyway, is drawn to that band at the top, which is the spandrel behind the glass. I think that if you look at rooftop addition,
Neil,
I mean,
can you
the
go
most
answer my phone and hit pound?
the most
Excuse me.
recent rooftop addition I can think of that I think I would suggest the applicant look at is the cable building addition, rooftop addition, which we saw last week, where the architect, I think, made a wiser choice in terms of having the rooftop addition be modeled on typical rooftop bulkheads that are clad in simple materials like metal, standing seam metal or stucco, and that seek to really not make themselves more prominent, but rather make themselves more recessive. And while I appreciate the applicant's emphasis on the corner as a way to recall the bay, the rounded bay, I think that projected cantilever cornice winds up just being a more visible, aggressive element at the roofs, at the skyline, where you really want a recessive element there. You want to reduce visibility. So I think personally that you could maintain the volume of the rooftop addition while changing its design and materiality. I mean, I agree with, I think it was Ann or Adi who said that the brick was a mistake. I think that, I understand why you did it, but I think it draws the building up. And I think you really want to have this rooftop addition be quiet, be recessive, and be as diminutive as possible, and to fade into that multi-story background to the greatest extent possible. You can also do it, as others have suggested, by reducing the size, by modifying the profile. I mean, that little angle that you have there starts to make it look kind of like a greenhouse from the 1980s. That I think you really don't want to do that, but you can modify the perimeter to reduce visibility, I think, and that would improve it. In terms of the storefront and the sign band, you really have a problem. And I really like aesthetically the corbelling detail that you have, but the problem is that it's not historic in any way. It doesn't belong to this building, and it's something of an imposition of a faux history onto that band, which is, we see that kind of thing all the time, I guess. But if, as Corey says, that band is really was never meant to be seen, and it was meant to be covered with either signage or metal cornices, then I think whatever is proposed for it should take its cues from the building itself. And I think on the West Street side, you do have an example of what was there, which is a metal cornice over the northernmost portion of the West Street storefront. And I would be okay with extending that around at various places, because at least we have evidence that that was part of the history of the building. You could also propose having that to be a sign band. We've seen examples of sign bands covered with flat painted wood signs, or I don't know. I just think you got to really kind of take the building for where it is. And the fact that that band was such a striking, smooth, unfinished band for so much of its history means that I think you got to really start with that and try to work with that. And I also agree with the testimony about the three-dimensionality of the storefront. I think that this storefront, as you analyze it, was very varied and very helter-skelter, and you don't want to take that away. I think that's a precious element that reduces the prissiness of the building, the fanciness of the building. But I think that its three-dimensionality is something that you want to try to recapture. And I would say that for the staff, I would be okay. I think they should look at doing an aluminum-clad wood window for the upper portions, which would preserve the detailing of the wood windows, but would improve their durability.
Great, thank you. Commissioner Devonshire.
Thanks, Sarah. We worked on the Keller Hotel many years ago, and this one has always evoked to me that same sort of waterfront, busy building. And well, I just briefly, I think Michael had the perfect word for this rooftop addition, which is aggressive. And I agree completely with Adi. I think it's too large. I think it's too aggressive, and I think it's too visible. And for me to be able to approve something on the roof of this building, it's got to come back. With regard to the sign ban, I have found in my experience working on buildings in New York City that if there is a lesser vitrified brick on a band above storefronts, it's not from a sign band, which were generally added later. It's from a cornice, which was either sheet metal or wood. And this was probably sheet metal at the turn of the 20th century. And so what I would be okay with is going back to a cornice above the street level.
Great, thank you. Commissioner Chen.
Yeah, I'm in agreement with, I think to the degree possible, the applicant should seek to, I guess the controversy and the issue is about the rooftop addition. And I think that many comments have been made as well as on the base. I also said that since there was testimony regarding that this is the more like a seaport or facing the sea, that you may want to reference some of the seaport additions on the South Street Seaport area or the historic structure to see how it can be done. Michael Goebel made an interesting comment, which is the dilemma for me, which is to say, if you make it really much more of a blend addition versus a more articulated rooftop, I understand the intent. I'm not sure where. That's why I made the suggestion of maybe look at other rooftop additions, since the reference is the seaport, because there's a danger there if we make it too bland. Then it may not be, since the applicant is trying to make the effort to design a nice addition on the rooftop, and so I think most of the commissioners' comments have been about reducing the profile or the height or the footprint. So no disagreement there.
Okay, all right, great. Thank you,
Sarah,
Commissioner.
Sarah, may I
Yes.
just add something? Since I started this, and I've listened and I've rethought my position on the rooftop addition. It is very aggressive at the corner particularly. And I think maybe just too detailed. So I just want to weigh in and say that if you're counting heads here, I think it should be redesigned in some ways to make it recessive, whether that means lowering it, setting it back, but the detailing, particularly at the corner, is wrong. So I just want to weigh in with that. Thank you.
Okay, great. Thank you. Thank you, commissioners, for your thoughtful comments. And we'll take no action today. We've had a lot of suggestions here, but I think a central theme is that while for some commissioners, a visible addition would be appropriate in this context, given the background and a relationship to the building on which it sits. However, I think all agree that the design needs to be restudied, that the addition needs to be reduced in height. That could be lowered it, and a combination of lowering it and or setting it back. I think also there were comments about simplifying it so that overhang, which makes it more visible, is an area that could be looked at in addition to other detailing and the configuration of and the rhythm of the fenestration. So I think lower it, reduce its visibility, simplify it a bit, although as we will still see it, there should still be a relationship, a design dialogue between the two buildings. And I think everyone also agrees that the brick detailing above the storefronts needs to be restudied. And I think I would encourage you to look at the idea of a sheet metal cornice, since that is likely what was there historically, and the dimensionality of the storefronts, and particularly the framing. So we'll take no action, and we'll ask you to restudy, and we'll have you back when you can, when you've worked on your design. And before we go, I also want to just note that the staff person who handled this application, Liz Diker, is going to be leaving our agency, which is quite sad for us. And she's been a great addition to our agency and to the preservation department. She joined us in 2018. She is a member of the staff team that handles applications for work on religious properties. She's been our ambassador to Staten Island, working on and leading many of the Staten Island projects as a resident of Staten Island herself. She's participated in our virtual open office hour program, which has been a great success, and we thank her for that and sharing her expertise with homeowners who've joined our office hours. And she's going to be going to the Henry Street settlement, where she'll be part of the new preservation facilities team for their properties, including a few landmarks. So thank you, Liz, and we'll miss you very much.
Thank you so much, Sarah and fellow commissioners. It's been a great honor and privilege.
Great, thank you. All right, so we'll come back at 1:35 this afternoon, and we'll ask all of the members of the public to leave the meeting during the lunch break and rejoin at 1:35. Commissioners, you just need to turn your audio and video off, and we'll resume then. Vice Chair Bland will be leading the afternoon session. Thank you.